Look around you, look beyond. You could make an unbreakable bond. The world around is not what it seems. Souls reveal beyond your wildest dreams. So many things I never could see. So many choices falling on me. Could it be my destiny to be Shaman King? To be Shaman King. If your spirit is strong, you could be the one. I can look at the world in a different light. I know what it takes to make it right, and I won't give up the fight to be Shaman King.
We need to just ban Sid from singing.
No, I'm very disappointed in you, Maxy. You just told me that the Shaman King anime is how you got into manga, and you didn't sing along with me. For shame.
Well, I mean, I've pretty bad vocal fry, so I wouldn't want to inflict that upon anyone. But also, just I had to bask in the majesty of that pitch-perfect rendition of what is just an incredibly classic opening to a 4Kids cartoon.
Honestly, it's not a bad song, you know? It kind of fits it, right?
I mean, it's better than a lot of that era's, like, Western anime openings.
Like the Ultimate Muscle opening they did, that one is weird.
Ultimate Muscle! Ultimate Muscle!
It's like this weird, like, country. It's like a weird country rock song.
Oh, yeah, because it has that weird, like, riff at the beginning where they're, like, using Texan accents.
Yeah. It's weird.
It's got a little bit folk rock to it, sure.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I kind of think their Shaman King opening sort of fits the series. It's better than the One Piece rap. We can all agree that, right?
Nothing is as good as the One Piece rap.
The One Piece
especially
rap
especially as it got further in and they had to work out how to fit in more of the characters.
Yes, Sanji's cupping, Jopper's doctoring, and Robin is archaeologizing.
Did they ever?
Apparently there is a version with Robin in it.
Is there? Why didn't they use it then?
I don't know, I think they use it in, like, one version of the broadcast somewhere. I've heard there's one with Robin.
Are you looking this up?
Yeah, I'm looking this up. I'm looking up what the lyric of the one with Robin is.
Oh my god.
In the meantime...
Welcome to our Shaman King podcast, where we look up One Piece.
Yeah, we look up One Piece openings. We're gonna spend the entire podcast talking about 4Kids and their very classic theme songs. But no, we are going to be talking about a classic, and that classic is Shaman King, which celebrates its 20th anniversary this year. Hiroyuki Takei's classic, his magnum opus. A Shonen Jump classic, even though it is not affiliated with Shonen Jump or Shueisha anymore. But we are joined to talk about Shaman King today by someone who holds the series very close to his heart, our good friend Maxy Barnard.
Hello, yes, I'm the one who likes Shaman King too much.
Yes, I mean, Maxy, you told us that Shaman King is the reason you got into manga in the first place. It was a very formative manga for you.
Absolutely. Some 14 years ago and a couple of months, for my 14th birthday, I was like, oh, I really like the Shaman King anime. I want to give the comics a go. I hear they read backwards. How interesting will that be? And I never looked back. Now here I am being some sort of crazy wild man obsessed with manga of all varieties, but like Shaman King is the thing that started it.
Mm-hmm. And you today will be our spiritual guide on our Shaman King journey as we talk about the series and its legacy.
I mean, I'll do my best. At least I'll provide the occasional bit of trivia and talk about just how bloody lovely it is.
There's a lot of history with this series, and it's pretty dense, so we have plenty to talk about. This could be another long one, folks. But while Maxy has a deep history with the series, VLord and I, surprisingly, had never read Shaman King before until this year. Well, that's not exactly accurate. VLord had. VLord, why don't you... Well, actually, let's start kind of at the beginning. with you, Maxy, you briefly just covered, like, why you wanted to check out Shaman King, but, like, explain to us what drew you to the series, what, like, was really appealing. Like, why was this the anime and manga series that got you in to this subculture?
That's a surprisingly difficult question. I think a lot of it just came down to it being very untypical of anime and manga of the time. Like, Hiroyuki Takei, he takes a lot of influences from older manga creators, such as Osamu Tezuka. And you can see this in these sort of chunkier bodies. They're more stretchy. The arms don't necessarily conform to normal proportions, rather than being like these big bendy tubes. The fingers are chunky. Like, Hiroyuki Takei's hands for early Shaman King is one of the most interesting looking things I've ever seen in my life. They're just big old sausage flaps, and I love them. And that kind of worked for me. A lot of manga at the time in the early noughties was all very inspired by Clamp or other sort of more realistic things at the time. And there was Shaman King dealing with spirits and world culture of all things. Not necessarily in the best way it could, but it still dealt with it full stop. And it just tapped that little part in the back of my brain. It was like, this is good.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot that's really unique about Shaman King that does stand out compared to what else was coming out at that time, even including like what was in the original Shonen Jump lineup in North America. Naruto and One Piece, Dragon Ball. There is something unique about Shaman King that did set it apart from those series. Though it does share a lot of influence and similarities from things that came before. One thing that struck me while I was reading Shaman King is that early Shaman King was very similar to early One Piece to me in terms of kind of how a lot of the designs looked and how a lot of the humor kind of played out. And to me, though, I think like the lineage, the connection between both of One Piece and Shaman King there was both Oda and Takei, I believe, were mentored by Watsuki, who, you know, is a disgrace, but, you know, he did influence these both Oda and Takei, I think. And that kind of definitely defined, like, how their styles looked, at least early on. I definitely think, like, the way hands are drawn, like you mentioned in particular, Maxy, and then also the way faces are drawn, the way, like, these round facial expressions with, like, rounded teeth, and then also, like, the way gags play out. All those seem very much inspired by Watsuki's work and his comedic timing.
Absolutely. I mean, and you see this across the other people from Watsuki's sort of special group of assistants that are mostly quite infamous at this point, like Mikio Ito, who did The Mysterious Masame-kun, and now actually does a series about him, Oda and Takei and everyone while they were assistants, and like how they started the series off. With the names changed very slightly in a sort of very knowing nod to, hey, copyright's an issue. But it's really fascinating. Or the late Gin Shinga, he had a sort of similar art on Shonen Detective Q. And of course Shinya Suzuki, who did Mr. Full Swing, which is, it feels like a more jagged version of the same art style that both Oda and Takei started with, but it's definitely in that wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, you talk about the original Shonen Jump lineup and how like there's this connection you can see between One Piece and Shaman King. You can even kind of see a connection as well between Shaman King and Naruto that isn't necessarily as obvious and does require one little bit of bonus knowledge, which is a lot of it is to do with aspirations towards that one ultimate goal, which is, you know, very typical Shonen Jump. But Hiroyuki Takei was also an assistant to Koji Kiriyama. Yeah, I got his name right. The author of Ninku. Ninku, of course, being the mid-90s Shonen Jump Ninja series that was the core inspiration behind Naruto. So it's like, it's very much a little small world microcosm with how things got thrown together in Viz's magazine.
That's really fascinating. When you look at the lineup of Shonen Jump and you see, like, how one generation influenced the next and how there is this cross mix of influences. I think Shaman King definitely kind of represents that very well in terms of having such a broad range of influences, not just from other manga, but from other cultures, from Western media, from all sorts of different places that makes for a really unique read.
Absolutely, for sure. I mean, Takei makes a point of listing, whenever doing sort of profiles, that American comics and manga are both like a sort of equal influence to him, and you can kind of see that. I mean, that's the most obvious, easy sort of, multicultural, it goes between the East and the West sort of thing. But it's no less true, and the attempts at including a racially and culturally diverse group of shamans from the world over mostly work. Like, the intent is really good, and I think that made it stand out in an interesting way for the time, and definitely now. So I've kind of gone tangential there. My mind was just thinking about that.
Mm-hmm. There is a lot of really interesting things to dig about like what influenced Shaman King, and then like how Takei took those influences and made them into like a cohesive story that is unified by very core themes. And I think that's what draws me most to Shaman King as I read through it for the first time, is like how Takei is able to take all these really disparate and really, like, ideas that feel like they should starkly contrast with one another or conflict with one another, but he makes it work because he has this core ideology that he's exploring throughout the series and trying to find an answer to. And to me, that's what's really fascinating about the series. But I want to talk about you, VLord, because you got into the series way before I did, years before I did, and you've been a Takei fan ever since, even though it took you until 5 seconds before we recorded this podcast to finish reading Shaman King.
Yes, embarrassingly so. So yeah, I got, like, into Shaman King. So, like, I guess the first thing I would explain is that what first drew me to Takei wasn't Shaman King, it was actually his other series, Karakuri Doji Ultimo. So back in the day, Ultimo was running in Shonen Jump, so whenever I would go to the library or something, I would see Ultimo in the issues, and it would be like, oh, cool, this art looks awesome, these weird mech doll fights are really cool. And so after, like, kind of getting into Ultimo, I realized that Takei also did Shaman King. And Shaman King was something I was vaguely familiar with at that point because I had been a fan of Shonen Jump for a while, but I just never bothered to touch it. So that finally gave me the incentive to kind of start reading it. So I think it was one summer when Sid and I were going to India for a while. I got a bunch of Shaman King volumes from my local library, and I just, like, read them on the plane ride. I think I got through, like, the first 14 volumes while we were in India. And
wait, hold on. Do you take that many volumes with you on, like, a flight?
yes, somehow.
But he didn't read them all on the flight.
I didn't read them all on the flight, so, like, we put them in a suitcase with a bunch of other books.
Oh yeah, but that's still a lot to take with you.
I don't know, I think, like, one of our suitcases that time was literally just books. So
I guess.
Oh my God. That's impressive. Don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing that. I just had to derail it because, wow, sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, back in the day, like, I think at that time, I think we were aware that our internet and a lot of our relatives and just the areas around us weren't going to be that great, so we needed something to do besides just watching, like, television in Hindi that we can't understand.
Hey, we could watch Shin-Chan, though. Shin-Chan was playing all the time. It was in Hindi, but it was Shin-Chan.
Yes, and Doraemon.
Yeah.
Doraemon was entertaining, even though we couldn't understand what they were saying. But, anyways, yeah, so, like, I just brought a bunch of books with me, because I needed something to do. So, like, I got through, like, volume 13 of Shaman King, and then, like, I loved it. It was amazing, and for some reason, I just never got back to it for a long time. Like, I went and finished Ultimo, because Ultimo, despite its flaws, I loved to death, and I hopped on the Neko Gahara train the moment it got licensed over in the US. But Shaman King was just something, like, I think maybe because of length, I just had never really bothered to finish until now. And yeah, that's kind of, like, really all there is to my story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Maxy probably has a way more interesting history.
Well, he just told it to us.
Did he? Yeah.
It still develops now, because the thing is you're saying you finished reading Shaman King like 5 seconds before we started recording, but also have you actually finished reading Shaman King?
That's the question, isn't it? Because Shaman King is a series that has really never ending. It's been franchised along the lines of Dragon Ball and Fist of the North Star and all those, and Saint Seiya and all those other series that are super popular, and that there are spin-offs, there are sequels, there's a lot of Shaman King out there left to read. And for me, I have only read the core series. I've read just everything that was run in Shonen Jump, and then the ending as published in the Kanzen Bangs, as they were called.
Oh yeah, one other funny thing I forgot to mention is that I actually read the Kazang Bang ending before I actually finished the series. Like,
when was that?
That was
That must have been a very confusing experience.
It was, like, okay, so I read it after, like, probably a few volumes of the series just because I was curious. I don't know, because I had heard that, yeah, like, it had been published years after the original series had ended. So I guess I was curious, like, what exactly it looked like in terms of, like, the art difference. So I was just like, okay, I'm not going to understand this story at all, and I'll probably forget it by the time I actually get back to it in my proper read. So yeah, I just kind of read all those chapters. I don't know why I did that, but...
Well, I mean, at least you have an understanding of how it actually concluded, rather than the previously official Viz release ending where the comic originally ended in Shonen Jump, with... In fact, no, with additionals to what was in the volume, because the actual Shonen Jump run just kind of ended weirdly with a dream sequence, whereas the 32-volume run ends with Manta waking up from the dream and I'm going, oh, we're going to do something.
Yeah, which they do like implement later into like the Kazembang like chapters as part of one of the other chapters.
Yeah, they repurpose it as the beginning of like chapter 295.
Yeah, so it's like redrawn and stuff. Of course.
Yeah, it's redrawn. So this chapter is kind of removed and then remade into a different chapter.
Which I mean is fine because that it's basically a non-ending.
Yeah, it provides a little more closure than like just ending with the dream sequence image. In the sense that Anna is going to take Manta and Anna and they're going to go find Yo, and so
yeah. For the sake of people who maybe don't know a lot about Shaman King, should we just go and give a very quick explanation of like its core, I suppose?
That's true. We should give a brief synopsis of the premise. VLord, since you just finished reading it, why don't you do the honors?
Do I have to?
I'm making you. If you do it badly, of course we can explain it.
So it's about a kid named Yo who can see spirits. He wants to be the Shaman King. And
now what is the Shaman King?
The Shaman King is like the basically the strongest shaman who can like basically control the world with the Great Spirit.
Who is the Great Spirit?
The Great Spirit is like a collective of all the souls that have passed on, and like it's all powerful and knows and sees all.
How often do we get a new Shaman King?
Every 500 years?
How is it decided who's the Shaman King?
Through a shaman fight.
This has actually worked surprisingly well at getting the points.
And where does the shaman fight take place this time?
It's supposed to take place in Tokyo, except it's not really Tokyo. It's an island called Tokyo.
Which is such a great fake out.
Though they also have to go to America for a bit and go on a little road trip.
And who officiates the shaman fight?
The Patch Tribe, which is like a Native American tribe, except they are like a lost tribe that's been erased from history and stuff.
And who are the spirits that are allied with the Patch Tribe?
The Great Spirits?
And how many are those?
There are 5.
And what elements do they represent?
Earth, wind, fire, water?
And do they have all of their spirits, or has some
they do
gone
not
missing?
have all of them, because the main villain of the series, Hao, stole the fire spirit when he had reincarnated 500 years before as a Patch Clan member.
And who is Hao?
Hao is the founder of the Asakura clan that Yo originates from, and he wants to become the Shaman King to eradicate humanity.
But is Hao just Yo's ancestor?
No, he's also his twin brother.
Yes.
And is he one other thing as well as that?
Wait, what?
He
is how
is
really just
a
his brother?
reincarnated descendant of the Patch tribe.
Is he really just a descendant of the Pat tribe, or?
He was for his second reincarnation. He has had 3 lives by this point.
Oh yeah,
in the
so like
story.
he's also how is Yo's ancestor, because he's the founder of Sakura Clan. Then yeah, he's a Patch tribe member who's like ancestor of Silva, and then yeah, he's Yo's twin brother.
And now here's the most important final question: what's Hao's name in the anime?
This is a hard question because I don't think I watched an episode of the dub that has his dub name.
Well, just think, if you were 4 kids and you saw the name Hao and went, "We've got to make this a bit more American," what would you change it to?
Hans? Hansel?
It's Zeke.
Wait, what?
It's Zeke. They went, "How? What do we do with How?" Zeke?
Who thought that was a good
which
idea?
I guess is like a shortened version of Ezekiel. I've never really thought what Zeke is short for as a name.
I guess that's what they're going for. Why? Though?
Why call him Zeke, though?
How is How a complicated name for the kids to understand?
Because it's an A and an O, Sid. It'll confuse them. they don't need to know
You can't
about
have
those.
names with 2 vowels following each other. No, that's just too confusing for the kids.
The kids can't know the truth that there's other people outside America.
There needs to be a consonant, then a vowel. The 2 vowels can't be close to each other. That's madness. That's anarchy. Cats and dogs will rain down from the sky.
So keep in mind, 4 Kids' version of it also took Wooden Sword Ryu, gave him a Hispanic accent, and changed his name to Rio. So like, they're not amazing at this.
What? I'm so confused. I've always been so confused about why 4 Kids is so worried about like being like having problematic elements in their shows that they edited out, or they edit out anything cultural, like it change like rice balls to donuts, but then they give characters really racist and stereotypical accents.
Yeah, but in the process of doing this, they're making the material more offensive. You'll
edit out characters' lips or lighten their skin colors, but then you'll give them really stereotypical and racist accents. What are you doing, 4 Kids?
I mean, we'll give them points for one thing. If there's one thing where 4 Kids' infamous dub of Shaman King really does deserve some credit, and that's the main way people were exposed to Shaman King originally, by the way, was the anime. It's that they took how let's describe it, the problematic character of Chocolove McDonald, and they went, we'll get rid of his giant racist lips, and we'll change his name to Joco.
Did they edit out his lips in the anime?
I want to say they did. No, I'm not so sure. That might have actually been Viz who did it first.
Yeah, I feel like that would have been too hard for them to do in the anime. That's just too many frames to edit, like in an episode.
Chocolove 4 Kids, which definitely is not a weird thing to search. Yeah, it looks like the lips survived intact in the anime, but they still at least have changed the name to Joco, which is universally an improvement upon Chocolove.
It's honestly a good name change if they had to make a name change, because it's still like a pun on Choco a bit, but it also ties into his gimmick, which is that he makes bad jokes a lot. So Joco works really well.
Plus, Chocolove doesn't really even sound like an actual name.
I think that's the joke in the manga, at least in the original manga, because, like, again, when Joco, like, tells his name to Horohoro and Ren, they're like, no, you can't be serious.
Oh, right.
They just try to ignore him. And they beat him up, and they just try because it's like, no.
I feel like trying to ignore Chocolove is kind of the main theme of Shaman King. For his teammates as well, like Horohoro and Ren do their best to ignore him.
I don't know, I think he becomes like a very respected member of the group.
Well, I mean, by the end of the Shaman fight, I want to say he's actually the most powerful of all of them. But, like, they still have to ignore his terrible jokes.
Yeah, I mean, they still will not acknowledge those jokes at all. There's also this great gag with Joco in that he constantly is kind of being, like, forgotten about in battle. Like, in the fight where, Team Yo and Team Ren are, like, facing off in, like, the last match and, like, the tournament part
He
of
literally
the
just
story.
stands there the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense why he's not, like, fighting, really, because it's like, he doesn't really have anything against Yo in the same way Horohoro and Ren do at that moment in terms of, like, the ideological difference, because his philosophy on life is very similar to Yo's, so it kind of makes sense why Horohoro and Ren, who, like, really are out for revenge and want to kill Hao, are, like, mad at Yo and his plan to, like, save Hao, quote-unquote, by, like, not kill him. So it's like, yeah, it makes sense why Joco didn't really have much of a stake in that fight, like, personally. But it was, like, a great gag when at the end of the fight, he was like, wait a minute, I didn't do anything. And then, again, when they're fighting all the patch plan, like, when he's fighting, like, the third to last one, it's like, he does it because, I haven't really fought up to this point. I should take one, guys.
I gotta do something at this final battle area.
I mean, Chocolove is a very odd character, and we'll probably come to more of that later with him, because, like, his power-ups during the later part of the tournament kind of presented a lot of issues for the story.
Yeah, I mean, Joco is definitely a character that gets so powerful to the point that they have to keep him out of things, just to, like, keep the tension. I think that's definitely a problem that happens during Shaman King at several points in which characters get so powerful that Takei has written himself into a corner, and so he has to, like, change things up or, like, introduce more powerful characters.
Yeah, like, there's definitely a sort of power creep that runs throughout, because, like, this series starts with really basic concepts, like, shamans can see ghosts, they put the ghosts inside their own bodies to utilize their skills. Like, the power level starts at the very base of what's possible. And then as it goes on, it develops the idea of oversouls, which is if you put a ghost inside an object relevant to the ghost, you can generate a sort of magical invisible weapon. Which very much feels like it takes a small step towards the stands concept of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but not as often as you'd think. And then from there it kind of becomes like, oh, what if you put it into two objects and you get a giant sword that's so big the anime doesn't know what to do with it? Or what if you have two ghosts and use them both at once, which is kind of where Chocolove's problems begin. Like, there's this constant raising of the stakes to the point where you then have people like the entirety of Team Gandhara who have just more power than they know what to do with in the actual comic. Sati Saigan in particular, the leader of Gandhara, is so comically overpowered that they leave her as a mystery until the last 2 years of the series, and even then don't really do much with her.
Gandhara is a really interesting question for me, because there are many members of Gandhara, but really Sati and the team that Ren fights actually get developed as characters or do much. Because it seems like Takei realized that trying to have this third faction, be involved, like, in a combative way. So Gandhara is really interesting to me because I think that Takei realized having a really powerful third faction be involved was just complicating too much. So instead of making them antagonists to Yo's group, they become allies, and they don't really become combative characters. They're more like supporting characters who are aiming to make Yo's group stronger so they can be the ones to fight Hao, while they kind of are more on the sidelines. So you don't really get to see what most of the members of Gandhara do. Takei introduces a lot of them, and a lot of them have some really unique designs, but ultimately only Sati and the team that Ren fights are ever really developed as characters in any way. The rest are just background characters for the most part.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, he does set up the Gandhara team pretty early on when, like, Joco does the whole explanation of them.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, they don't appear until, like, the mid-20s of volumes.
Yeah, so it takes 2 years after, like, their first mention for them to get expanded upon. And I guess by that point, Takei was, like, really reconsidering where he wanted the direction of the series to go.
I mean, Takei definitely seems like, based on all the series that I read of his, like, it seems like he has this habit of definitely having a bunch of ideas thrown out there, and then only some of them stick, and the other ones are just kind of tossed into the trash.
Perhaps.
That's it. I mean, you can see this in the pre-Shaman fight stuff, where it shows, like, teases of a lot of the characters who are coming up, and maybe two of them end up properly resembling, like, who they end up being when they're properly revealed.
This takes me to something that, right back at the beginning of the series, where in the first color page, in the first chapter, you know, in that first 2-page color page spread, let's look at all the characters that Takei draws. He draws Yo, Manta, Anna, and the Hana-Gumi are there, alongside Ren's sister, June. Yeah, June's there, Tamao's there, Miki is there, and Konkichi and Ponkichi are there. So it's like, he has a lot of these characters planned out from chapter 1, it seems, or at least their designs, mostly. And then I guess, like, most of these characters, except for the Hana-Gumi, I think, end up serving their role in the series, like, well.
Yeah.
But the Hana-Gumi, to me, is really interesting, because it seems like Takei had the idea for them, like, right from the start, but I don't feel like he got to do everything he wanted to do with them.
Like, the thing with the Hana-Gumi that's interesting, too, is that they show up on the popularity polls before they actually even were formally
before
introduced.
They even have names, they're, like, ranking in the top 20, top 30?
Like, they were that popular off the designs alone from, like, what, 2 or 3 panels that they'd shown up in?
And I'm not surprised because they're really good designs.
Yeah.
And I think Takei really liked those designs too, and he tried to give them some moments. Like, he showed one of their fights in the tournament, but, like, ultimately I feel these were characters that got left to the wayside a bit.
Yeah, like, I feel that's kind of a big issue with Shaman King at times. There's too many characters, and it's hard to really balance them.
Ultimately, the Hana-Gumi do get to go and do the one singularly most impressive thing in all of Shaman King, which is beat the author of Shaman King and his assistants in the Shaman fight.
That is pretty funny. But, yeah, I mean, their fight against, like, the, little princesses, or the magical princesses, was also pretty brutal, too.
Yeah.
But I feel like they didn't follow up on that, like, on the how they were developing them as, like, characters that well. Because ultimately they're killed off, you know, when... I guess that's more like a spoilery thing, but I don't know if we've been hiding any spoilers.
I think you might as well just say it. Like,
I think with Shaman King, you can't hide spoilers. It's... Everything that happens is this big earth-shattering event, even if it ends up undone 5 minutes later.
yeah.
Yeah, but when Tekalote betrays everyone because he's found out about Hao's secret, which is that he can read minds, and he feels so betrayed, like, he teams up with Mansumi, who is, like, Manta's bodyguard and works for his father, who is, like, this big businessman. I forget, like, what he does, but he's so rich he has his own warship, so... So, like, he teams up with them to, like, kill off basically all of the remaining members of Hao's followers, and then the Hana-Gumi are, like, trying to, like, run, when their ghosts are, like, trying to run to Hao's side to, like, kind of ask him, like, is this true? Like, did you really, like, keep this secret from us? And then that's when Hao's like, oh, great, Hana-Gumi, you're here. Now I'll just eat you up. And that's basically it for them. I mean, they don't get eaten by Hao, but, like, that the resolution to their story from what seemed to be building up for them, like, as characters, it felt like it was cut short in a way.
Yeah, like, after, like, the whole fight with, like, Anna, Tamao, and, like, Mikahisa, it seems like something's gonna happen to them, because they feel like they might change sides, or, like, maybe they're gonna betray Hal, but that never really happens. They just get killed off.
Yeah. And that was just interesting to me, because they seemed like... It was interesting to me that Takei had these characters planned from, like, the beginning almost, but they didn't end up being used in a way that seemed significant.
This is kind of a problem that Takei has all through Shaman King of having... I mean, we're saying, like, he throws these ideas at walls and sees what sticks. It's more than that, he changes his mind a lot about what he's doing. Like, it feels like a lot of the developments with the Shaman fight and then going, oh, no, it's at America, and oh, no, fake out, it's at an island called Tokyo. Like, I think stuff like that very much comes down to the fact that his original ideas either don't pan out or he just goes, oh, I've got something else I want to do instead, or I feel trapped, I'm going to move on. And, I mean, it gets worse than that. The big notable one would be the temporary death of Taoren.
Yeah.
Who, in the weekly publication, and I think it's preserved in the actual volume releases, he's surrounded by all the X-Laws, and they're like, oh, are we going to bring him back? Are we going to not? And his ghost is like, no, whatever you do, don't bring me back, don't do it. And the chapter ends with him actually somehow reviving himself from death, grabbing the gun of one of the X-Laws and like pointing it at his head and saying like, oh, no, you've got to kill me. Next chapter begins, that didn't happen. Like, half of the chapter never occurred.
Yeah, that confused me because I was like, wait, so was his ghost trying to grab the gun, or was that his actual body?
Was that just a visual representation of what he wanted to do?
Yeah.
Like, I feel it gets retconned to that, but definitely, yeah, it seemed like Takei changed his mind. It's like, oh no, I don't want Ren to wake up and hold Marco's gun to his head. I want this...
Well, it never even gets properly retconned. It's not specifically addressed at any point. It's literally just, he goes... This didn't happen, it's fine, we're moving on. It's so bizarre. I feel like there's very few comic authors who do this without having an unusual publication already. Like Yusuke Murata doing his version of One Punch Man will frequently redraw whole chapters because it's online and he can do that. He can revise and republish until he's happy.
Yeah, exactly.
In a weekly magazine, that's... insanity. That is the very definition of what you do not do if you want to succeed in a magazine.
Yeah, it's really strange. But I can kind of see like Takei's frustration because with these weekly deadlines, he might not have been able to think through what he wanted to do with the story to the level, that he was satisfied with. So that's why he was consistently like making changes to like where he wanted the story to go. Because he might have found, like, this idea that, oh, okay, I'll try and do this, but then he isn't satisfied by the direction that things are going. And so then he's like, okay, no, I'll change it to something else. I think, to go back to, like, Gandhara, that was the case, too, because when they explained, like, okay, we need to defeat Gandhara in order for our teams to be, like, among the final 3 teams that will go off to the final place where the final test for the Shaman fight will be held. And so we gotta defeat all the Gandhara teams. And then we have the fight with, Ren's team against one of the Gandhara teams. And then after that's basically the end of fighting against Gandhara, because Gandhara realizes, oh no, we're just gonna help you guys. We're not gonna fight against you. And I think that Takei was like, originally he was gonna just have, the tournament just continue normally. But then he was like, after just one fight, no, let's forget the tournament. Let's do some different things and then have things kind of reconvene just to get us to the next thing.
Like, after the first few matches of, like, the traditional tournament structure, like, it's just completely thrown out and most of the conflict is outside the stadium. Like...
And one of the nice things about that is that we don't get to see any unnecessary fights. Like, the first set of 4 fights we see in the tournament are all focused on teams that we are really going to be focusing on throughout the course of the series as a whole. And it's structured that way. We get the first fight is with Ren's team against Boz, who are characters we've seen before, and they're teamed up with Tekolot, who is a character who ends up playing a huge role down the line.
Yeah.
In the second fight, we are introduced to Jean in, like, the Team X1, who also includes Lyserg and Marco, characters we've already previously established. And the opponents they fight, the brother of one of their opponents ends up getting revenge down the line in a really significant way. Then the third fight, we have Yo's fight against the Iceman, which this is a fight that I had heard about long before I read Shaman King, and I was kind of anticipating as I was reading through the series. Because on Weekly Manga Recap, when they were doing their review of the series, I remember Rolity was really complaining about this fight in particular. Because he said, okay, this fight lasts a volume and a half, and it's just the Iceman, going up trying to attack one of the members of Yo's team. They're revealing, oh, I have this super awesome new power, but no, I'm not gonna strike the finishing blow, and da-da-da. And the thing is that they go into this fight with Yo saying, I'm gonna end this match in one blow, which he does do, but it takes a volume for that one strike to happen. So I was anticipating, when this fight would show up. But actually reading through it, I kind of liked it a good deal, because I did like how he showed off Ryu, Faust, and Yo's new powers. Even if it did take a long time, which is, I guess, another point we'll talk about in a
And,
little
like,
bit,
at least from a narrative perspective, there was a purpose to it, because Yo wanted them to fight with no regrets. Like,
yeah, I
he
thought
felt
it was...
like if he would just take them out in one strike, they would hold a grudge against him, because they would feel like maybe cheated out of that actual combat.
And thematically, that relates to Yo's philosophy really well, that, you know, hate just inspires more hate, and, you know, if you hurt someone, they'll hurt you back. So Yo is trying to leave them with no regrets, so that, you know, they won't have those lingering, like, drive to... They won't be unsatisfied and try and be fueled by that unsatisfaction to do something wrong in the future. So I like how it ties into that ideology. And then, of course, like, that fourth match in that first set of sites is the one that shows off how and, like, what he can do. And, yeah, I think everything ended up being purposeful. Everything ended up having a purpose in those first 4 matches. And then even the matches we see later down the line, like the Gandhara fight, and then, of course, like, that final fight with Ren versus Yo, you know, that's all pretty the essential things we needed to see. So in that sense, I kind of like how the tournament skips all the matches with characters we didn't really need to focus on that much. But at the same time, they have like all those characters that would have been fighting in the tournament. They have them fight outside the tournament, where they can't be constricted by the rules of the tournament. So it's like Takei felt limited by the tournament structure, so he wanted to have the characters just fight outside the tournament, and then only use the tournament as a means to just finish off certain things, or get things arranged in a certain way that would be convenient for the story. Like having that Ren versus Gandhara match fight that like introduces Gandhara, introduces like what we can understand them to do, and then they can move on to like, okay, so now we know kind of like the baseline of what Gandhara is capable of and what their philosophies are, and now we can just move on to like go back outside the tournament and do something else.
It also works just really well because then it involves characters that are not necessarily directly involved with the tournament, like Anna or Tamao. Where
it allows Anna and Tamao to have fights, which is really nice. I really loved the Tamao and June versus the Hana-Gumi fight. It's really great, honestly. So yeah, I think I'm very pleased with that. And that Takei did decide, okay, the tournament, I'm not going to just have this be the whole series. I'm going to have things outside the tournament.
It didn't become Mare.
Yeah, it didn't become Mare. That's my biggest problem with Mare, is that entire series is just the tournament for the most part. But what do you think, Maxy? I mean, how do you feel about like how Takei kind of just cut out of the tournament?
Well, I think the cutting into the tournament itself is kind of interesting in its own way too, because like the whole tournament structure, it being these 3-on-3 things, feels very deliberately inspired by Saint Seiya and especially Dragon Ball's Budokai tournaments. Mm-hmm. But like with the idea of one-upping them, because you know you've got to be bigger, you've got to be better if you're going to succeed, by going, oh, we'll have 3-on-3s, and you can almost see, especially with that volume and a half long fight, the realization of, oh, if it's a 3-on-3 fight, I have to kind of focus on 6 characters.
Yeah.
and it's a mess. It's not a great way of doing a tournament manga. There's a reason why tournaments tends to be one-on-one or at most like tag team setups when it comes to shonen manga. And it's because it's just carnage to try and focus on too many characters at once.
Yeah. I mean, I think Yu Yu Hakusho found the best balance in just having each round have a different rule for how many characters would be allowed to fight in each matchup.
Yeah, and even in Yu Yu Hakusho, we only have one 3-on-3, really, that's important. And that's arguably the worst fight. So.
Yeah, it is.
When Yu Yu Hakusho got the opportunity to do a second tournament, it broke the author. Tournaments aren't a great thing to do. They're there. I can count on one hand probably the amount of manga that do a really good job with the tournament structure. Despite the fact that it's like tournaments are popular, they don't really make for great comics. And I feel like Takei had a really hard time moving away from them as well, because like You talk about the fight with Hana-Gumi versus Mikihisa and Tamao and Anna and that, like, that still feels like it's interwoven with other things going on at the same time, and so it all becomes even more eclectic, even more all over the place, and it's hard to really know where your attention should be. Should you be thinking about the fight that's going on even, or should you be thinking about the mysterious, definitely evil mecha that these two children are hanging around? Like, the moving away from the tournament, and no, what's the best way to put it? Moving into the tournament is you can see Takei trying to compromise his vision for the series into something that will like move forward in a structured format and work. And moving out of the tournament is him realizing that that wasn't the best idea and making things worse for himself creatively to try and go and keep tabs on the story through just spreading everything out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it probably helped Takei to do that too, because there are just too many characters in a sense, like, to keep track of. Like, there's this great, like, 2-page, like, just thread, I guess.
Of all the contestants. Like, just however many, 96, I think? And then later on, there's a second spread of that same thing, but with characters blacked it out.
Yeah. And even then, there's just so many of those characters left at that point in the story when he shows that it's like, oh wow. There's like so many characters we need to follow up on and have closure to.
And some of them are characters we may not have even had a formal introduction to.
And in the tournament structure, it'd have been limiting to get around to all those characters because we have to wait for them to like show back up for their match. Whereas they can consistently be doing things outside the tournament.
Absolutely. I've just had this moment now where I'm thinking of that 2-page spread of all the characters. I'm just flicking through the volume I think it's in, which is 13, I want to say. And like, I think that's another great example of him going, here's all these ideas I have. Half of these characters will not look like this when they actually get to do something.
So true.
Oh no, it was earlier than that. I think it was actually before America that it showed all their faces, which is a worse decision.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta compare, like, those two different times he shows that
because I'm
how
sure
the character designs change.
Yeah, I'm sure that, like, there's probably at least a few characters on there that look completely different.
I mean...
here we go, Volume 9. Oh my god. I mean, first of all, half these characters don't even really appear. Some of them look a bit too much like racist caricatures.
Oh, you found it.
He's got a mask that's kind of halfway between two different ideas.
Yeah.
Who's
this guy in the fish mask? It's like so many characters that don't actually show up.
Lyserg already looks like he's in an X-Laws uniform from his collar, which is weird. Jean's not in her Iron Maiden. You can just see the back of her mask there. God, it's bizarre. It really is. Is Block in here? Yeah, there he is in his little Jawa hood. Oh my god.
One thing that was really interesting to me is that when Horohoro was first teased, like during the Ren versus Yo fight, and we first see him, like he's wearing this African-like mask, and he's surrounded by other people dressed similarly. And then in this 2-page thread, we kind of see characters who seem to be wearing African-ish garb. But when we get introduced to did I say Horohoro earlier? I mean Joco.
Chocolove. Yeah, you said Horohoro.
Yeah, but when we get introduced to Joco later, like his backstory has completely changed, and then like his posse has, their backgrounds have completely changed. So
no, but they still explain it. They still explain the African outfits.
Oh yeah,
because
that's right.
They were wearing them to sneak into the shaman fight and hang out on the outskirts, and then they all get killed.
Yeah, they get killed off screen.
Which is great. Like, it's literally just this throwaway thing of, oh yeah, we were wearing those masks to like sneak them in so they can hang out, and then all of them get mech murdered.
Yeah, and still their character designs look completely different from what they look like.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I guess one tangent from that.
Oh my god, I'm looking at Lucas. Like early character design here.
Is that supposed to be Lucas?
I think it's pretty. I think it's supposed to be Lucas.
God,
look at this face. It's nothing like Lucas that looks later. It's like at the bottom. It's like at the bottom right, like in the second right row, like above what appears to be Lubstev and Sailor M.
Wait, is that person right there supposed to be Marco?
What? I don't think so.
I think Marco. No, that's the vampire guy. I don't... No, that's a vampire guy, so even though he looks like a Midamaru, sorry. I think Marco is the bottom left of the right-hand page. People at home, please turn to pages 132 and 133 in your copies of Shaman King Volume 9.
With like the weird spiky hair.
Yeah, it might be that.
But yeah, Seiram and Red Seb look pretty intact, as much as they just both look like little kids and one of them's a bit beat up. Like, although I guess the weird thing is, oh no, which one's the girl's name?
Sailor.
So, yeah, weirdly, she's technically showing an emotion, which the entire...
That's true. That contradicts her characterization in the series when she shows up. Is that she's, like, emotionally, like, removed because she's, you know, still traumatized from the death of her father. So, yeah.
Mm. Well, although it turns out that's not quite true.
It's not quite true, but that's, like, at least the act she's putting on.
Yeah. Oh, God. I mean, those... Red 7 and Seiram are, they're difficult characters from the perspective of the series, because I feel like whatever was planned for them and their father kind of kept having little tiny changes to make them less and less effective, to the point where it was just like a bit of a diversion. And now they're incredibly relevant again, but not really in a very positive way. Relevant again now in Shaman King the Superstar, although not really. Shaman King Flowers, and then hopefully the Superstar will pick up on it later.
Oh no, did they get killed off?
It's complicated to talk about sequels.
Okay, now I have to go read Flowers.
I have heard what happens to John in Flowers, and I'm not very happy about
that. What happens to who?
John?
Jean?
John, however you pronounce it.
I thought it would be Jean.
It might be Jean. I honestly, I can't think of the last time I heard it out loud, so I just had to check we're on the same thing. Yeah, although, I mean, points were due at least... Okay, so, everybody, spoilers. Shaman King ended in 2004. It did not end properly. It got a proper ending in the Kang Zeng Bang editions years later, after people all around the globe starting completely meaningless petitions to encourage Shueisha to do so. Then they released some Bunkaban editions, which are like cheap 2-in-1 paperbacks that were like running every 2 weeks in supermarkets and 7-Elevens and stuff, that contained remix tracks that did a little bit more building, a little bit more connecting the dots between various series. Including Butsuzone, kind of, which made it clearer that that Dainichi Nyorai, I definitely said that wrong, Sati's ghost, is the Bodhisattva that sent the main character of Butsuzone down to Earth for his mission. Which is, again, all series connects.
Mm-hmm.
And then, after all of that, Shaman King Flowers happens. In 2012. It was announced in 2011, so that gives you an idea what the turnaround was like there. Which was set 16 years after Shaman King, and 9 years after the epilogue that was included in Volume 32 from Bari no Uta, focusing on Yo's child, Hana, who had been raised by Tamao, because if there's anything about shonen manga sequels you should know by now, parents are either absentee, dead, or awful.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And it doesn't end there, because Shaman King Flowers, by an incredibly bad turn of luck, was published in a magazine called Jump X, or Jump Kai to some people. So I'm just opening the door for my dog. Okay, there we go. Jump Kai lasted 2 years. It was not very popular. It was less popular than Ultra Jump, which is the Jump magazine so unpopular that I have no idea why it's still being published to this day. So that got cancelled in 2014, during the middle of a Shaman King Flowers story arc that in turn was based on an old one-shot of Takei's from before Shaman King called Death Zero. And at that point, that was it for Shaman King. We'd learned horrible things that had happened to everyone since. We'd learned about the complicated life of Hana, Yo's son. We learned about how Hao isn't getting to have the great grand job as God in Shaman King, as the Shaman King anymore. Like, that's not working out, because it turns out the G8 aren't just a former political construct that no longer includes Russia, so is now the G7, but are also a group of 8 previous Shaman Kings that all have to have a majority agreement to allow the current Shaman King to do his job properly. which is a bizarre thing that leads to the follow-up to the Shaman fight called the Flower of Maize, which is also a 3-on-3 tournament structure where you have a manager. Now, this brings us neatly to a quick explanation as to where Shaman King is now and why it's so relevant to talk about outside of just its 20th anniversary. For about the last 2 years, and most importantly this year, Takei has been in the process of removing all connections of his intellectual properties from Shueisha and transferring them to himself and Kodansha, mostly so that he would have the ability to continue Shaman King in some capacity. And that started this year in April with Shaman King the Superstar, a sequel series that runs 2 chapters per month in Kodansha's shonen magazine Edge, which is also a small side spin-off magazine, much like Jump X was, which doesn't worry me at all, not at all, because it also runs things like Megalobox, so hopefully it'll do okay and not be a cancelled magazine. But so now we have a sequel to Shaman King that is technically continuing from Flowers, mostly following the third Anna, who, crucially, it's worth mentioning at this point, Anna herself from Shaman King, Yo's fiancée, is a character who's previously from his series Butsu Zone and from a one-shot called Anna the Otako, but is consistently relegated to side character status because I guess they didn't want to have her be the main character of Shaman King. But I digress. Third Anna, Native American, related to the Patch tribe. She's the current star of Shaman King the Superstar for its current arc. And then we have Tao Jun, Tao Ren's sister, who is, alongside Horohoro, the main character for her own series, also running in Shonen Magazine Edge. Shaman King is back in a big way, and it's so difficult to explain to people.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty awesome that Shaman King still endures, considering that, 15 years ago it was canceled because Jump thought people lost interest in it. Now, that's clearly not the case 15 years later.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a series that was cancelled so brutally that its last volume almost didn't come out, and now it's got a full re-release with new covers digitally, with all colour pages intact from Takei's own personal archives, which is amazing, by the way, and 2 sequel series. Like, that's a lot. And, I mean, a really big popularity poll that was just like, hey, let's find out who's the most popular, and the answer was mostly different versions of Yo.
Well, I mean, there were only 2 different versions of Yo that made the top 10.
I was saying, in the top 10, beyond that, there's a few more.
Yeah. I mean, there's 2 versions of Yo in that top 10, and 2 versions of Horohoro in that top 10. Which,
I mean, in the defense there, Horohoro and Anna are the 2 greatest characters in Shaman King.
That's really interesting you say that, Maxy, because I mentioned earlier that weekly manga recap review of Shaman King.
They hated Horohoro.
Chris hated Horohoro. He was like, fuck this character. He sucks. His story with the bear was awful. He got the bear killed. I completely disagree with him, but...
That's an amazing, heartfelt story about the importance of how hunting used to be for feeding, about returning to nature, and now it's this disgusting sport thing. I feel like that was a really potent message.
Was. I thought so too.
He got to have sex at the end of it.
Yeah,
well, when I first read that,
which to me is really weird because Kororo, his spirit companion, at the beginning of that story arc, she leaves him because she gets jealous that he makes the comment saying that Lyserg's spirit companion Morphia is cute, and so she leaves him, and so then Horohoro gets injured because he can't use his ice powers when he's snowboarding to cushion his landing. And then later, she comes back because Horohoro gives this really, heartfelt speech about, why the bear needs to leave the woods, stop being around Bluebell, for both of their own sakes, for both of their protection. And then, that's...
I feel like I have to say now, just trying to witness to this, do you know the origin of Kororo?
Like her backstory we find out later on, or because...
We find it out in, I want to say in Shaman King Zero, the prequel set of one-shots that got a 2-volume release. But, Kororo... was like a girl who has a school crush.
Yeah, that's in the series
Horohoro.
itself.
Yeah, that's in that's in the
Right.
gangbangs. Yeah.
So like that's the really crucial thing to keep in mind is like his ghost spirit is like this girl who loved him.
Yeah, so that's what's weird to me is that Kororo like got so jealous that he called Morphea cute that she abandoned him, but then like he has sex with Bluebell and like she's still fine with that. Like that's so weird to me.
The whole thing's weird. Oh, I mean, if we're being honest, both notable instances of characters having off-page sex is kind of weird and clunky. And really, the first of them with Yo and Anna is pretty much just there to go and explain later on how Hana comes into existence.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. He had to see that they're gonna have a kid together, like a fourth of the way into the series. But it's also kind of weird to me that like just having like these 13-year-olds hook up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really important. They're like 14 and 15.
Yeah.
Like, at no point would I ever make frivolous accusations, because then we have to get into a serious territory to do with a person who Takei formerly worked for, and I don't assume there's any of that level of ill intent.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a weird look.
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess there's other shonen manga that have sex with teenagers. I was reading Video Girl Eye pretty recently, and I got pretty close to that. So,
Video Girl Eye is a very peculiar. I mean Masakawa Katsura's entire rom-com output for Shonen Jump was a bit more risque, but like realistically risky, which is weird because like you get used to stuff like Tolovru where it's just
yeah. You get a lot of shonen where it's just teasing. It's like, oh, here's some like teasing of nudity and here's some groping, but like no, it doesn't close to the actual sex.
I think that's what makes Shaman King so shocking with this, because it's not explicit, it's not even really said, but you definitely know that's what's happened, and it's treated
maturely,
both goofily and also just like a real thing that's happened.
Yeah, I think that's why I can like kind of I appreciate what he does with it, because for one thing, Yo and Anna's relationship is very well developed up until that point too. Like we know that they are definitely a couple, and they do have mutual feelings for one another, and those are explored like 10 volumes later in even further detail. But like we understand that these are two characters that definitely care for each other and do intend to spend their lives together.
Absolutely.
Hold on, just bending down to go and grab volume 19.
Because that's very relevant. And I think that whole Montessori storyline that comes up for volume 19 and 20 as, I think what was originally intended as a midpoint to the series.
It seems that way.
I mean, that didn't work out, yeah. But like the big flashback that really does show you the very real feelings between Yo and Anna, which I feel like they're always there, but I think people would always focus on Anna's prickliness or how Yo was very literally designed to be the most laid-back stoner in comics. Like, and I mean, we can't say this enough. Like, if you want your 420 weed humor, listeners, Shaman King is all about weed.
Yeah. Yo seems like he's baked all the time. He's like, yeah, man. It's all about peace and love. No need to get violent.
The leaf is throughout it. The Yo's favorite musician is very explicitly a Bob Marley rip. Like, Takei definitely likes weed.
Yeah.
Like there's and people use this as a thing with like with creative people to go and be like, oh, they must have been high when they made this, and that's absolutely a bullshit way of talking about this stuff. But it is just this very odd thing that has to be noted in here, is how much the imagery of like weed and weed culture runs throughout Shaman King. Even the logo with like these little like leaf effects coming off it is supposed to partially evoke that, especially more so with the Japanese original logo, which is very, very graffiti-ish and flowery and lively. It's fantastic. It's a very weird thing about the comic.
Yeah, I mean, Shaman King's a very spiritual series, and what gets you into that state of mind thinking about the high spirits, other than getting high, like getting your mind up into that place?
Takei smokes weed, Maxy Barnard 2018.
Well, now that we found the eulogy for my gravestone, epitaph. So characters, by and large, get a lot of individual focus on this. We've established this with how the tournament kind of goes really long. Are there any sort of big character focus moments that really sat well with you two?
To be honest, I really like all the characters a lot. I mean, I think the character whose transformation, whose character arc from the beginning of the series to the end, that's like the most like profound to me was Ren. Who, he starts off the series being this angry, murderous little man. He kills one of the patch officiants, Chrome, the one who loved to dance and sing, as they repeatedly mention. Yeah. Like, every time they say Chrome's name, like, in those early chapters, it's like, oh, he killed my friend Chrome, the one who loved to dance and sing?
Yes, he killed him, the one who loved to dance and sing. We must avenge him, the one who loved...
It's great. But, yeah, I mean, I like how Ren has this change of heart and, like, matures as a character. Even getting to that point, as we talked about later on, where he's like, no, I won't let them revive me and sacrifice Yo's place in the shaman fight just for me. And even before that, when he's, like, thinking back and, like, he's regretting, like, what he did when he killed Cronin's, like, he's looking back at that memory of it. He's like, stop, don't do it. And he's like yelling at himself, angry at himself, and so guilt-ridden about it.
God, and the really awkward part about that whole scene of killing Chrome is how, like, he's killing him, but Chrome's still dancing and singing the whole time. It's very peculiar.
Yeah, I mean, Chrome doesn't, like, it takes him in stride. He doesn't hold a grudge. Like, I mean, Ren only is able to kill him because he catches Chrome off guard, basically. Because Chrome, he pretty much, like the other patch officiants, he was a strong dude. Like, he, in their fight, like, he, pretty much held his own. And the reason Ren killed him is because he was feeling, like, belittled by Chrome. That, like, Chrome didn't take him seriously and stuff, so.
Yeah, I mean, Ren had, like, proper psychosis level issues to deal with at that time. Like, he wasn't a healthy little boy. And even as he slowly started growing taller, not tall, but taller. Even towards the end, he still holds all these issues. His death and resurrection there at, like, volume 18, it makes a big difference, but also he's never quite... I don't think he ever really forgives himself.
No, not really. Like, that's reflected in his later fight with Nightcrawler, where...
Which, I've always wondered if that's why Takei put him with the rest of Team Realm, with Chocolove and Horohoro, because it feels like there is these goofy, lively characters as like an empathy teaching tool for him.
But they're also characters who have these deep regrets in their past that they have to, like, work through. I mean, they are also responsible for the deaths of other people, and like, even people that they care about. Like, we talked about Horohoro's past, but, because he had to ignore this girl who had a crush on him because of, his circumstances. He was, like, this child of wolves, and his family, like, told him that he can't, like, interact with other people or else he'd get them in danger. But, like, because he ignored her, like, she inadvertently ended up dying because she got into an accident. And then, of course, with Chocolove, he was a murderer. He was, like, a gang leader. In his past, he killed Lubsev and Sailorin's father, and he, and...
Which is less of a crime than he did think.
Yeah. But he killed other people besides him, too. Yeah. And also, he ended up getting Alona, his mentor, killed because his gang members, like, killed him right in front of him. But, he took Alona's teachings to heart and did not, like, get revenge on, like, the people who killed Alona. But, like, he forgave them and, like, showed them the error of the ways and helped reform them, his former crew.
Yeah. Like...
And so all three of those characters are connected by, like, that regret of, like, they are responsible for the death of others, and they're trying to atone for their crimes by becoming better people now and winning the shaman fight and trying to, have a positive outcome from when they become the Shaman King. Horo wants to have those field of flowers, those, I forget the technical, the specific name. The butterbur flowers. Yeah. He wants to, make the world look nice with butterbur flowers. Like, Chocolove wants to just make people smile with, his comedy and jokes and stuff. And Ren, just in general, wants to be, atone for, like, all the evil and all the deaths that have occurred because of the shaman fight and stuff. So, like, they all have those goals. So I think Takei was very smart of, like, having those characters connected in that way. Like, that's why I think that team of characters is probably, like, the most interesting characters in the series, like, as a whole, because they're all thematically connected and their development all ties into one another. Like, they all influence one another in very important ways, and their team dynamic is the strongest too. So
yeah, I mean, for all that can be said for Team Yo, like, at the point that Ryu, Yo, and Faust are a unit, like, nothing really changes. You don't feel any stronger bond in them. I don't even necessarily feel like the dynamics any stronger. They're just kind of a team of very strong shamans. But Team Ren, for all intents and purposes, become the main team in a lot of ways. I mean, especially once you hit that midpoint, you have Ren going through his death and resurrection. You have Horohoro having his big fight against Blocken, where you get to see, him deal with his various inner turmoil about the shaman fight. You get to see him, like, protect others successfully with his, like, stunningly low level of power. Mm-hmm. He still manages to actually, like, fight and win. You get to see him have a small moment of connection with his father. And then Chocolove has his death as penance and then resurrection without his eyesight, which is, like, a huge change. Mm-hmm. Like, all three of them get the biggest moments in the story, really. Even when, like, Yo goes to hell and he gets his swan over soul, like, it doesn't feel like as big a moment, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like those two characters have the biggest emotional moments, and especially even with relationships to characters outside of their core group. Like, one of the most memorable Ren moments to me is, like, towards the end of the series, after Ryu has sacrificed himself in the fight with Led just to expose Led's powers to let the others defeat him. They were originally just going to plan to leave Ryu behind and resurrect him later, but Ren is the one who says, hey, someone resurrect this fool. He did good. He deserves to be brought back. Yeah, that's a really big moment, because, like, at the beginning of the series especially, Ren just did not think highly of Ryu at all. He did not respect him, and now he's the one...
No, he cut off his pompadour. Yeah. I mean, what a monster.
But he's the one who has the humanity and who has the imagination. It's like, no, we're not going to leave him behind. We're taking him with us. Mm.
Yeah, it really just shows, like, how far Ren and really all the characters have come at that point, because by the end, like, Horohoro and Ren have finally kind of come over to kind of Yo's ideology of, like, we shouldn't kill Hal, we should actually try to change him as a person.
Yeah.
And, like, it's kind of going through this whole thing of, like, conflict isn't the answer. It's not... This endless cycle of death, this endless cycle of violence isn't going to solve anything. It will just re-permeate the violence and the conflict.
And I mean, and Ren even, like, follows this through post-Shaman King. He becomes, like, head of a massive company that's taking control of, like, factories and workers and making them follow better safety regulations to go and keep the planet safer. He's taken on so many of Hal's former teammates and reformed them by having them work for him. He's married Jean and had a beautiful golden-haired child. Jean dies.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Maxy, that's a bit concerning. What?
It's alright. It's not his fault. It's just because some strange girl with freckles wanted Jean as her oversoul. It's fine.
That seems worse.
It's worse. It's much worse.
See, this is why I was telling you about why I was not happy with what I've heard of what happens with Jean and Flowers.
Like, obviously, due to my incredible anti-piracy nature, I find it difficult to recommend people check out Flowers at this point, because you can't even buy it in Japanese right now, and there aren't necessarily plans to reprint it until, what are we at, 25? Until October at the earliest, because they will have run through the 35-volume re-release of Shaman King. But it is hands down the most insane sequel I've ever found for manga that doesn't even feel like it connects cleanly. It's the same world. It's definitely a sequel, but a lot of stuff is just wrong or weird or Jean's dead and someone's spirit.
That Jean thing really sounds like something I'd find in a Western comic. Oh, we're gonna kill off this fan favorite character for shock.
Oh my god.
Not just that, but to kill her and to make her a weapon for one of the key villains.
Really dehumanizing her. Yeah,
That's kind of messed
so
up.
peculiar, and it works as a good motivation for Tao Men.
but it's like fridging. You're fridging a female character to motivate male characters.
It is absolutely fridging, and the worst part of it is it doesn't change the fact that Tao Men isn't a very likable character, which is a mess. But that's kind of the magic of Flowers. No one in Shaman King Flowers is very likable because, and hear me out here, I don't think Hiroyuki Takei really likes young people today. And if you were to check out Shaman King Flowers, where Hana is very much the almost stereotypical sort of listless millennial, I guess Generation Z would be fair. Generation Z kid who's like, oh, we're all doomed anyway. What's the big deal? The asteroid Apophis is going to collide with the Earth in less than 40,000 years. It won't. Just an example. So like it's written with a lot of negativity towards the young people. The only one who comes out of it pretty well is Illumi, the third Anna, who again quite tellingly is the main character for the start of the Superstar. Which to get across how weird that is. Part of the cliffhanger we've been left in is that like Hana isn't in the real world right now. He's connecting with Death Zero, a dead military pirate ghost on a mysterious island in the Great Spirit, I think. It was a weird time for the series to end, and it's a weirder time for it to come back. And I know I keep diverging into where it's at now, but I feel like it's interesting to see, because it's gone from a series that was very directionless as Shaman King towards the end, where it didn't quite know how to finish. Even as it was going through the straight line of let's fight each of the patch and get to how, it seemed like it was losing focus. And now it's got like a laser style focus, but just for very peculiar things.
That is really interesting. But to me, it's no surprise that he's focusing so much on the third generation Anna, since it seems that he's always really like the character of the original Anna since the beginning of her creation.
If we're being real for a second, Anna is probably the actual best Shaman King character. As much as it's easy to have like individual favourites and stuff, like the amount of work done with her, even when she doesn't appear in the story for a while, is really solid and three-dimensional for a character whose joke is basically, you know, the nagging wife before she's a wife, and the nagging is to make you physically strong, not to make you do stuff around the house, you know?
Yeah, Anna's like one of the best characters in the series, and I think might be one of the best like female leads in any Shonen Jump series, especially when you think about other series that were also running alongside Shaman King in that time period. Like, even if she's not a participant in the shaman fight herself, she just does so much and has so much influence over the course of the series, and is such a well-developed character in her own right that it's like, to me, she was like one of the most compelling parts of it.
Yeah, compared to say like Manta, where like Manta feels like he goes to the wayside a lot of times, Anna always feels like she's there and like involved.
Yeah.
I mean, I can really drive home how far Manta fell from being the focus by just pointing out he never appeared in Shaman King Flowers.
I'm not surprised.
Like, he barely turned up in From Bari no Uta, you know, like
I mean, what would he do? He doesn't have any powers in the manga.
Oh, hey now, but what about in the anime where he gets Mosuke as his spirit guardian and can put him in his laptop to make it into a hammer?
Well, I've heard about that, but yeah. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, like, as much as I can lay shade at 4Kids, the actual anime itself is kind of bonkers.
Yeah, I've heard it does not follow the manga very closely, which kind of makes sense considering it ended 2 years before the actual manga ended. No, even
and I mean, and
like earlier than
points to the anime, it has a better ending.
You would think,
compared to the original run of Shaman King.
Really?
Yeah, like,
the original
the
run.
Crimson Bang ending is massively satisfying, but at least the anime actually ended.
Right. I mean, the Shonen Jump ending is not the
that's
ending.
not
It's
an ending. Can we
It's
even
literally in the middle of the Horohoro versus what's his
Kalem?
Column, yeah. It's literally in the middle of that. So.
Like, that's not even an ending. That is cliffhanger cancellation cocktails.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the fights that there was actually a reason to look forward to out of the patch fights as well. So it's such a weird place for it to just drop.
Yeah, it's like it was one of the best patch fights. It's the one where we get that backstory, like Horohoro. And Horohoro's like, deep regrets about his past and all that. It's really unfortunate. It ended before he could even draw that.
Like, really, yeah, imagine waiting 5 years to read that. Like,
yeah.
That would be insane.
Which again, I think is part of why they didn't anticipate anyone wanting the final volume. They were like, who'd want this? We've ended it in the worst place.
At the same time, though, wouldn't Volume 31 be a worse place to end it? Because, like, I don't even remember where this volume ends, but it's not a good place either. Like,
but I mean, they just wouldn't have collected the final chapters of another volume.
Yeah.
I guess Volume 31 ends with Anna, like, about to go over, like, what everyone's current power levels are.
Yeah.
I've got to say, because I have to say it with every shonen manga with power levels, it's worth mentioning. Power levels are a mistake.
Yeah.
The second you have to apply numbers to stuff, the numbers will get out of control.
Yeah, I mean, even in the series itself, they end up making a point that, the actual number isn't so much important as how they use their mana.
Yeah, I think they mentioned in, like, the fight with Horohoro and the football player.
Yeah.
Like,
I think
how, like, basically, like, the mana will always, like, can be manipulated based on, like, the user's will, like, and if they have, like, the ability to learn more, that'll increase.
Yeah. So it's like how much reserve power they have, but it's not like necessarily if someone with a higher level of mana will always necessarily defeat someone with a lower level of mana.
It's kind of like power levels in Dragon Ball, where, like, literally you can just manipulate it.
Yeah.
To a point where it becomes obsolete.
That's not even it for Shaman King, though, because it's about your power level, which is the reserves of energy you have, but also about the actual Ryoryoku level of the ghost,
that's true.
Which is the maximum capacity for strength that ghost can have for
Which
you.
I'm still not sure how that works, though. Like, are you supposed to add them up? You're supposed to multiply them, or divide them, take the square root of the shaman?
Basically, you could have your own spirit power level be 1 million, but if your spirit was Kororo with the Ryoryoku level of 21,000, you can only put 21,000 of your spirit power inside whatever oversoul you make with them.
Yeah.
So is your spirit's power the only thing that matters then?
Or you can only use so much of your spirit's power depending on your own level of mana.
Yeah. This is why the great spirits matter a lot, because the idea is they have such a high Ryoryoku level that if you've got enough spirit power in yourself, you can fully fuel up those.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of how that works, the concept, which is it's a numbers game, and that's not the most fascinating thing for a fight. You want to see how they fight, which is why, again, we said the Horohoro American footballer fight, Horohoro against Blocken as well. He won that fight running on fumes because he used all the abilities available to him intelligently. Mm-hmm. Which I almost feel like is Takei rebuking himself for focusing on power levels before then, even though he then immediately goes back to power levels.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the power levels are just a way to kind of, immediately let readers know, okay, this is, the comparative level of strength, but this doesn't necessarily mean this character can defeat another character just because he has more mana. It's the main thing is, to show, okay, this is where our protagonists are in terms of relative mana, and then Hao is way up here with over 1 million or whatever.
It's just to drive home. It's really just to drive home the point that they can't beat Hao in a physical fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a shorthand because kids love being like, oh no, this one's got the bigger numbers, we should be scared. Yeah. That works great for the younger readers. The problems come as with Dragon Ball, as with Name Your Poison here, is when nerds get older and they obsess over the stuff and go, oh no, it should be this way because this one's got this, so Goku could fart and destroy the planet and that's why he's better than Superman, There's an escalation involved depending on the sort of person who reads them, to be fair.
Yeah, but power levels, well, I'm always disappointed to see them being used in the series because I feel like it's just not a concept that I've ever seen applied well. Applied in like, thing that can be manageable. Like, again, with Dragon Ball, Toriyama had to drop it after Frieza because it just got to a point where it's, like, so ridiculous you couldn't believe anyone could ever stand a chance against anyone near Frieza's power after that.
Well, I mean, in Dragon Ball, it's almost deliberately being criticized.
Yeah.
I mean, almost immediately from the starting point, it's like, oh, what does the scouter say? Oh, it's over 8,000. Crunch, right? Like, it feels like the statement being made there is, oh, hey, we've got power levels, but they definitely don't mean anything. Everybody reading, look, they don't mean anything. And that was a lesson nobody learned.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with Dragon Ball, is that it was the villains who relied on power levels, and then the protagonists did not.
And after a while, they realized, oh, hey, these are useless because literally they aren't telling us their actual power level. They can change it whenever they want.
Yeah, because you can hide your power level, which is a phrase I try not to use much anymore because Nazis have gotten into saying it. Let's not think too much about that. But, power levels, ultimately kind of meaningless and a bit of a shame, but they serve their purpose for young readers.
Yeah.
I gave a thumbs up there, like you could see that. I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
Yeah, we can totally see your thumbs up on this audio podcast.
Well, I used Tokugero to make my thumb really big, so you could see it.
I love
around
that
the world,
so
you know?
much.
That was
The Hitchhiker Oversoul.
They were trying by having Tokugero give that giant thumbs up, and that the same guy comes to pick them up each time.
It's amazing.
But, and they do more with that with the anime because that storyline runs a little longer, so it's constant, the Tokugero thumb stuff. And actually, that's something to appreciate. We've not really talked about them much. The Oversoul designs, in both their mutability and how different they can look and how they grow and change over time, it's completely fantastic. Like, the Tokugero thumb's, like, a really easy example. He just, like, put it into his sword to make a giant thumb. Why not? But, like, more often than not, they slowly shift and change shape. Like, Horohoro starts off as a face on the bottom of his snowboard, then it becomes like he straps a snowboard to his arm and it's like a statue surrounding his arm. Like, there's a lot of interesting changes in these designs that are literally just a weapon or a power set. And they're probably one of the best things artistically in the series because of this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, they're really visually distinct and interesting. I think Takei is just a great designer in general because he makes all these really unique and varied designs. And, like, the changes in the different forms of the Oversouls are all, like, they're it's a very clear progression in, like, how more complex they look and, like, how more human-looking they look. Like, the first Oversoul Yo uses is just, like, this kind of, like,
bulky, like, big,
ball,
like,
yeah, like bulky ball-like thing that's like got, supposed to be like a Midimaru's face that's like clamping down.
But then you compare that to say like the White Swan, like it's a very sleek kind of sharp design, and like Yo even explains like how it's supposed to be used for like more versatile, more precise movements while still keeping like a more like fortified and like formidable offense, which is like really cool. That's like well thought out, and the fact that Takei like is able to change the Oversoul design so much throughout the series, like Ren and Yo go through like so many different upgrades for their Oversoul, but each one feels special and it has like a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, and he knows how to make a big impact too. Like talking about that fight with the Iceman earlier, and like that reveal of that giant sword that Yo has, and like his new Oversoul. That was like a huge moment. That was incredible.
Like, one thing Takei also does really well is just his use of 2-page spreads. Like, and I think that's something he's even gotten better even over time in Neko Gahara, but just when he knows the perfect moment when to do a spread and when to really show the impact of what's going on in the action scenes.
Absolutely, yeah. Sorry, I was nodding enthusiastically there. Like, the double-page spreads are great. And that's what works so great for the reveal of Spirit of Sword, is that it's like this ridiculously huge sword that takes up like this big 2-page thing. And then, weirdly, that might be one of the Oversouls that's kind of a problem in its own form, because after that, you have the realization that actually that's probably a little bit too
big. It's going to be hard to draw this.
Or, which, again, is what led to more changes in how they were designed. You see this with the original idea as to what happens when you fully master an Oversoul in the Ren-Yo fight in, like, Volume 7, is that the Oversoul just becomes the
It literally
gods.
it becomes a
is literally just
stand.
coming-
Yeah.
It just becomes a stand.
Which, a little bit too JoJo, but also I think didn't have that same impact. And then straight afterwards, you see he goes back to abstract ideas, and immediately it's just this much more interesting take on them.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another thing worth talking about, because I always feel that. How do you guys generally feel about how everything went with the X-Laws as an entity, but specifically with Lyserg?
I thought Lyserg's character development ended up going pretty well. I feel like, yeah, in the end, of course, because the tournament gets thrown out of whack, like, what I feel like whatever they were setting up with, like, oh, they're gonna have to fight against Lyserg, you know, and then convince him to change his ideology, ended up getting thrown to the wayside. Lyserg just realizes, oh, I'm not comfortable with the extremes that Marco and Jean are willing to go through, like the fact that they will kill people for getting in their way of their mission. I'm not comfortable with that, but like, so he kind of changes what he thinks he wants. He thinks he wants to get revenge on Hal and kill him like the other X-Laws do, but then he realizes he's not very comfortable with taking a life. And I think that is a pretty powerful character arc that, you know, ties into the philosophy that Yo has, and that entire group ultimately has. The group of 5 that ultimately, you know, get the Great Spirits and confront Hal at the end of the series.
Yeah, I think, like, one thing that I remember is, like, Lyserg really seems to hit hard when, Yo mentions, to, the kids who are using the golem that revenge is the answer. Like, revenge is, like, revenge will, death will just lead to more death. That really seems to hit him hard, and, like, he starts to think, is, like, killing Hal really gonna fix anything? It's not gonna bring my parents back. It won't make me happy. Like, what's the point in it?
Yeah, I mean, when Lyserg attacked, so after Horohoro's fight with, like, Big Guy Bill in Block and Mire,
Yeah.
you know, he brutally beat up Big Guy Bill. And then, like, the other members of Hal's group try and get revenge on him, and, like, that's when he's like, what are they doing here? And Yo tells him, well, it's no surprise they're here to get revenge. If you hurt people, they'll hurt you back. And that, you know, makes him reflect and makes him think about, do I want to continue to perpetuate this cycle of vengeance and hatred and violence and death?
Yeah.
Like, that's, to me, that's like one of the big core themes of Shaman King. And one of the big themes that I found really compelling. This idea of this cycle of violence that, you know, hurting people will cause pain back to you in turn, and how that affects each of the characters, how that's reflected in a lot of different characters. And ultimately they make the decision not to continue that cycle of hatred and violence, but find forgiveness and find peace.
Yeah, like, we also see this with Jan and Marco as well. Like, after it's, like, the truth of the X-Laws is revealed, they kind of really reflect on what they've done. Like, Jan is, like, very kind of disturbed in a way that she killed people for this kind of false ideology.
Yeah, I mean, what John taught she was a complete lie fabricated by Marco. She wasn't like some holy maiden that was given, like, divine power. It was like she was, you know, given these powers because of Marco's experimentation. So, you know, her whole, like, sense of identity and her purpose is just shaken to its core. And so she has to, like, and then, it, of course, like you said, it comes back to haunt her what she did when she killed, like, Anatel, because Anahal gets revenge on her and kills her and Marco.
Yeah. Well, I think, like, with Marco especially, like, you can really see him mellow out, like, a ton after that whole conflict with Lucius initially.
Yeah, I mean, Marco is fueled not only by his hatred of Hal and wanting to get revenge on him, but also for Lucas for betraying him. Like, his best friend who, you know, founded the X-Laws together with him, he defected to go over to Hal's side. And so he has that resentment and hatred. And the tragedy with his character, with Marco, is that ultimately, like, in his and Lucas' final battle, they couldn't just finish. They couldn't just, like, resolve their differences, resolve their ideologies. They had to kill one another in order to stop the other. fulfill their ends. And Yo was like, how could you do this? How could you go to that extreme? I thought there was another way. I thought you knew that. And they're like, well, this is the only thing we knew how to do.
Which is so sad because they had both reached a similar conclusion on what true justice was. It was love. And like when Marco says to like that's what they have to give Hao. They have to give Hao love.
Yeah.
That's like such a powerful moment because for the entire series, Marco is just
he's fueled by hate.
He's so fixated on death and proving justice by killing and punishment.
Yeah, he wants to kill all of Hao's followers, and Yo steps in and says, no, I'm not going to let you kill this guy. He doesn't deserve to die for what Hao did, like when he's trying to kill Big Guy Bill. And again, like, Marco is like, and then the entire X-Laws are like, we are going to sacrifice our lives for our revenge because we are fueled by hate to that extreme that we will disregard our lives for the sake of killing Hao and ending him for good. And so, like, we have members of the X-Laws who do exactly that. They go on suicidal missions just for the sake of killing Hao. Like Team X2, the ones who fight Hao in the tournament. They go into that fight knowing they're going to die, but their only goal in that fight is to just reveal whatever Hao's powers are to the other members of the X-Laws, just so they can ultimately have more knowledge to kill Hao. Like, they sacrifice their lives ultimately pointlessly because they didn't need to do that in the end. And that's the same for Team X3 too, when they go off on their own, when they defect from the X-Laws pretty much to kill Hao with the satellite. That ended up being completely pointless. It just costed their lives. If anything, it made the situation work because it alerted the entire world to the fact that the shaman fight was taking place on this island, and it drew Manta's father there to try and destroy it and like take over the facility and try and get the power of the Shaman King for himself.
And even like with X3, like when like they actually have to take the shot against Hao, and Hao's crying because he's remembering his mother, like they're hesitating. They even like in the back of their minds, they're probably thinking like, is this really okay? He's not just this supervillain. He's like legitimately crying in front of us.
Yeah. So, like, they kind of realize, oh, this isn't just some nebulous monster, this ultimate incarnation of evil that is completely irredeemable. This guy that we're trying to kill, he has a soul. He has humanity in him. And that creates a moment of hesitation, and that, they wouldn't have succeeded either way. Again, it's just a completely futile gesture that they do, but they completely lose their resolve they had at that moment, too. So the X-Laws as a group are a really well-developed group of characters that have like this good fundamental ideology to them that gets challenged and ultimately, gets resolved. They ultimately find the same answer that, Yo is searching for and how to deal with Hao, and leading to, that great finale where everyone comes back to give Hao love, to tell him, hey, it's okay.
They also have really cool oversouls.
They have also really cool oversouls that are basically they're cars that they transform into angels robotically.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense, but it's freaking awesome and hilarious because Marco and Lucas were car dealers before the game. The priest, like their whole backstory was like, that they presented at the beginning was a lie because apparently they were just car dealers before.
Yeah, like what the?
So I like how that idea that they're on this holy mission is like completely turned on its head and undermined when we reveal like what's really motivating Marco.
For Marco and Lucius, initially it was like same as everyone else. It was revenge for themselves for how like burning down their church and like hurting their lives and their loved ones.
I mean, they were very religious because they, supported local orphanage or church where they were helping out kids, but yeah. Like they weren't, but it's not like they were on this, like,
they weren't doing it for
crusade.
Some, like, they weren't doing it for some greater good. They were doing it for themselves.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that Takei touches upon this idea of, like, they're using their religiousness as a pretense for just pursuing their own revenge. Like, they're using it as an excuse to just satisfy their own, like, angry desires, which to me is actually kind of a really like real thing, that you're masking like what is a really like primal, selfish, hateful desire with this idea that, oh no, this is God ordained. We are justice. We are on the side of God. So it's actually a really like complex, a mature idea that Takei is kind of addressing with what are ultimately really silly characters, but also really compelling. I think Marco is definitely one of the most compelling characters.
Those battle armor.
Yeah.
There's a very valuable sentiment there that you touched upon, where the X-Laws very much do feel like they're about the wrath of men disguised as religion, which is historically the cause of the majority of conflict in human history. And it fits very neatly with Shaman King and Takei's like a very pacifist message. Like it uses force, excessive force frequently, but it's about trying to head to a world where people can be at peace. And that recurs later, like the whole thing with Death Zero and Shaman King Flowers that comes up down the line is very much about Hana getting a spirit who is like a gun-wielding fighter jet pilot. Like there's something to be said for, I mean, he was a kamikaze pilot, I don't know why I said fighter jet. And which in turn says something about pacifism. That it's saying something about the Japanese people who threw their lives away in the name of global conflict, like literally threw their lives away as their attack strategy. And it's using that to make a commentary. Like Takei is a pretty hyper pacifist dude in his works, and Shaman King feels like the epitome of that just because of Yo's entire belief system throughout the series.
I think that's what makes Shaman King really resonate with me, because I really, really empathize and relate to that ideology of Takei's, that pacifistic ideology, that idea that, you know, this, again, like, that line that just, to me, just stuck with me, like, hate breeds more hate. If you hurt people, they'll hurt you back. Like, yeah, that just really connects with me, and I really like how Takei uses these different factions of characters to explore that idea. And ultimately, they come to the same destination. Everyone does. They all appear in that the second to last chapter, where they all confront Hao. And ultimately, Hao is not defeated through violence, but just by showing him love. Just by, you know, reuniting with his mother and having him get some emotional closure, and like realizing, you know, what he really wants is not to destroy anything. What he really wants is not to kill everyone, but he just wanted to be a part of a community, to be a part of something. Or like to have something that he lost again.
I feel like that's the conclusion that Takei maybe wasn't able to come to before the original run of the series ended. Because, I mean, you see it with this string of fights against the patch. Like, it's become a series of battles to try and get to a peaceful solution. And I think it took that time away and coming back to it to realise that the ending, the way of defeating the quote-unquote final boss, had to be through love and peace and not through another power-up battle extravaganza. And it really lands it. Like, I talked about how much I really dislike the original Shonen Jump ending for Shaman King, like just a complete non-ending dream sequence. The Kanzenbang ending, I think, is one of my ideal endings for a Shonen Jump series. Something that really delivers on what the series is. It doesn't deviate from message. It doesn't just do a time skip, show who's married and look at their kids, because handily Fubari no Uta had already done that beforehand, which I think left a lot more room for it to just have a really satisfying conclusion.
From the first chapter, Yo had been saying, like, people who see spirits aren't all that bad, and throughout the entire series, like, he keeps that idea, and when he confronts Hao, despite everything
he has literally every possible person who could see spirits, like, be there on that big old spirit train, proving his point.
Yeah. Despite everything that Hao did, Yo was still willing to give Hao that chance, give him the opportunity to change.
Yeah, literally no one in the series is presented as irredeemable. Like, from the very beginning, even when we're confronted with characters like Taojun or Tokugawa, who ostensibly are responsible or have done really heinous things.
Literal mass murderers.
Yeah, they eventually come to a place where they are shown empathy and they are extended a hand to, and we understand like who they are as people, and they change for the better. So that's something that carries through right all the way through the end of the series. Like, even the most despicable of people, are shown to have humanity to them.
It's true.
And the only people who don't, perhaps, get redemption are the people who aren't willing to change. And I think that's another thing that was important to emphasize too, is that you also have to be willing to change, willing to be a better person in order to become a better person, to be redeemed.
I mean, it shows that everyone from vampires to NFL players to victims of nuclear bombings, like, any one of them can both be full of hate and capable of healing both themselves from that hate and doing better in the world. And I think that it's one of the most optimistic messages in a comic I've ever read, and it's part of why the whole series resounds with me so much, is it is just this... It doesn't feel like a cliche moral. It feels like a very sincere presentation of an idea almost from Takei himself as to how the world can be better. And that's nice. It's nice to have something nice end out a series rather than, oh, I got the bad guy, stabbed him, it's fine now. That sort of thing. Not to dunk on Bleach too much, because by saying both that and the time skip children thing, that's the big target here
with
for
Bleach.
these
We didn't
criticisms.
actually see the stabbing though, so
Yeah, but like, I feel like that's the perfect example of the other way it can go. Like, I like Bleach's ending well enough, but I don't feel like it says anything of particular import. Whereas Shaman King's the polar opposite. I think it took a long time to get to its ending, but what it had to say was definitely worth the wait.
Takei may have changed his mind about, like, how he wanted the plot to go, but he never changed his mind about what the story was about and the underlying philosophy of it. Like, what Shaman King is really about is this idea of pacifism, idea of, like, love versus hate, and, like, love winning out in the end.
Absolutely.
There's a lot we can continue to talk about, but I feel like we just reached, like, kind of a nirvana, kind of a place of, like, yeah, this is the core philosophy of Shaman King. This is what it's about and why you should read it.
yeah, I'm really happy I finally got around to reading this entire series after so long, because it really has just supplemented my already existing love of Takei and, like, his work, and, like, it really just shows how great of a mangaka he really is.
Yeah, I really wish I had gotten into the series when I was first getting into manga, because this would have been a really powerful formative work for me back then. This is like everything that I would have wanted in a series, because not only do I deeply resonate with Takei's philosophy, I really love how this is truly a multicultural manga that has a really diverse cast of characters of all sorts of different backgrounds and ethnicities, which is something that I'd been starving for when I was a kid. And yeah, this really, that too, it makes Shaman King really stand out. Even if, Takei does rely on some stereotypes that are unfortunate, especially in the case of Chocolove.
I mean, I guess, like, is it just me, or in the Kazangbad chapters, does it feel like Chocolove's lips got smaller?
If they may have been, but to be honest, I really like that Viz just edited them out entirely. That must have taken an insane amount of work, but honestly, I think he looks better without the lips entirely.
Yeah, like,
I was gonna say, if the lips had been shrunk, that would be something to go and check over at Mankintrad or Patch Cafe, like one of Andy's sites. He will have meticulously tracked whether there was a minor change in anything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, removing it all together was definitely a great decision on Viz's part.
Yeah.
And it was relatively speaking for the time where Viz weren't massively good at their redraws, and certainly not when it involved the things that were in their monthly print magazine. they did a pretty good job removing the lips.
Yeah, like you can't tell
it wasn't hugely.
Yeah, you can't really tell right away unless you've like seen pictures of Chocolove before.
For like the most part, I barely like had it in my mind. Oh, this is what his face is supposed to look like. Like they did a really good job just taking out the lips and just making it look, this is just how his face is.
It feels like something Takei would draw normally.
It still feels like the right character design, even though, a big element of it is missing. This is one case of censorship that is definitely for the better, I would say. This is one time censorship makes a change that was actually really needed. I guess on that related note, on something I just noticed earlier in our discussion about like the first 2-page spread, the color spread in the first volume, in the first chapter. So, okay, in the Viz edition of Shaman King, they censor Ponkichi and Konkichi's genitalia. But in this first color spread, you can see, like, right here, with Ponkichi, his balls are intact. And holy crap, I can't believe they missed this on their first printing.
I wonder if that's...
It's not that they missed it. I believe it's that redrawing color pages is incredibly hard.
But it is in grayscale, so you'd think they might have...
Oh, crucial thing. It's in grayscale in the volume. The chapters in the volumes are the same ones that were running in Shonen Jump's print magazine, where the color pages were in color.
That's true, but you'd think they would have edited for the volume at the very least.
Maybe. I mean, the series is rated T for teens, which, if that follows the same way that like a 12 film rating works, you're allowed one swear word and one genital in the whole thing. That's fine.
Well, I suppose Dragon Ball Z did air on daytime TV, evening TV, back in the mid-2000s with Gohan's genitalia just showing out there, so...
Oh, and Viz's release of Dragon Ball as well. Yeah. Goku's dingle dangles right there the whole time. Even when you can't see it, it's there.
But that was just something that I noticed that was like really funny to me. I mean, I was like, oh my god, did they miss this? Holy shit. But yeah, I also have to commend Viz's efforts for drawing underwear on Monkichi in every panel they're in.
Well, or even just trying to convincingly make a stretched out scrotum that gets sliced by a knife look like a belly.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. But again, let's take a second to appreciate that what Takei got to draw in Shaman King at one point is a giant pair of testicles getting sliced open, and you just think to yourself, that's kind of beautiful in a way. That he got to do this in a teen magazine, like, without the same level of controversy that something like Jungle King Tar-chan got with Tar-chan swinging off his dick everywhere and pulling his nuts
Takei's
out.
true legacy in Shonen Jump. Getting ball sacks cut.
He got away with that ball sack cut. No one else has ever dared.
Oh boy.
They didn't have the skill. They didn't have the willpower.
I don't think I've left us a good escape from this subject.
No, it's like Takei, that's what makes Shaman King so great, is that Takei has this really mature, awesome, really thoughtful philosophy, but he also draws like most crazy shit, like those crazy Ren and Stimpy inspired Tanuki and Fox spirits, and of course the golem, which is very clearly an Evangelion.
I think in a weird way I try and embody Shaman King in my very own life, which is actually very much a sort of just actually learning lessons from it, but I'm going to make it sound really flouncy. I try to be empathetic and peaceful and caring and listen to problems and be outspoken on what's wrong, but I will also be really horny on Maine all the time.
Oh my god.
Funny enough, I don't think Shaman King is one of the more fan-servicey series, though. Like, I can't think of...
Oh, no, it's rude.
Oh, it's crude.
Rather than
it's very crude at times. It has some schlocky humor.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, I mean, it's if you couldn't tell, Tamao's spirits, they might be a ballsack and a penis on a fox and Tanuki. They are also Ren and Stimpy. And are, by default, better than Ren and Stimpy, because Takei's not been involved in any awkward controversies yet.
Yeah.
So,
Remake of Ren and Stimpy, but with Ponkichi and Konkichi.
I'd watch it.
Yeah.
I would absolutely like be into that, it would certainly wash away the bad taste of Ren and Stimpy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying, animation studios, forget doing an anime of Flowers, a remake of Shaman King as an anime. Don't do anything like that. Do Pionkichi, and it's really hard for me to remember both of their names. Pionkichi
And Konkichi.
Konkichi. It's any name where there's a rhyming structure like that. My brain immediately goes, you said one, you can't say the other.
I can remember their names because I know just from Pompoko that that's like something associated with Tanuki. That's like the sound of their beating their bellies, and then Kon is a word for fox. So that's how I remember their names. But yeah,
God, Shaman King's real good, guys. I feel like the sour note of Shaman King, it has to be addressed at this moment in time. Because it's changed hands from Shueisha to Kodansha, there is currently no available English release of it. You might be able to track down print volumes for the first 32, like the original run that Viz did.
Yeah.
They're not technically in print. They're not easy to find. The license doesn't technically belong to anyone in the West
And
right
some
now.
of those volumes are getting a bit pricey. Like, I had to pay $20 to get volume 26 to complete my collection.
And it has to be said, some of those early volumes are inconsistent at best with wordings and translations. A lot of Tao Ren's attacks, the formatting of how they're named frequently changes between chapters and volumes. But if you can find them, it's worth finding them. Like, if you've heard us gab on about Shaman King for the last, like, hour, 2 hours, however long we've been doing this, we've been doing this for a little while. Like, the main thing I want to take away is that Shaman King is every bit as good as it sounds. It's a little wonky, it's a little sloppy, but in turn, I think that makes it one of the most perfect examples of how weekly publication can work. It makes it exciting and fresh every step of the way. Like, there's a lot of things to love, and hopefully there's a chance that Kodansha USA will take a chance on doing a Rave Master style reprint, or if not that, to do a new translation for the new editions. That would be lovely too. I'm not crossing my fingers. I'm hopeful, but we'll see.
that's beautifully put, Maxy. And yes, hopefully we will get a re-release of Shaman King by Kodansha USA sometime down the line.
Yeah.
And one that includes the proper ending as shown in the Kanzen Bangs.
They better have the proper ending.
Yes.
I mean, which is why I want them to do these new re-releases, because we're up to volume 25 with the Japanese re-releases now, which have a lovely English logo, which feels like it's begging to be released
I
in
think
English,
they'd have
right?
to do that release too, because that's the only release that's under Kodansha so far.
Technically, they own the rights to all the earlier
Yeah,
releases.
they are
They're
printing
they're
those though in
doing-
Japan. So would they even let Kodansha USA take that old 32 volume release and re-release that?
They would be able to let them. Whether they should let them is another matter. Branding's important,
Yeah.
so it's difficult.
Regardless, they'd probably want to use the newest release.
Yeah. And it would be nice. It'd be nice if they did, because again, it's up to volume 25 now. They're doing 5 volumes a month in Japan. They're including all of the short bonus stories, the remix tracks from the Bunkerban editions. They are going to include all the Kanzenban chapters, both the extra ones for Marco and Thingy, and the actual ending, which is nice. It completely messes with the chapter orders, but it's fine because, honestly, vital additions to the story. And it would make sense. Shaman King never sold hugely well for Viz, but it sold well enough for them to finish it, and I feel like that's probably worth taking a punt on. I mean, Rave Master didn't sell bucket loads, but it sold all right for Tokyo.
I mean, considering
Pop.
all the weird licenses Kodansha USA has done, I'd say it's definitely more than possible. Like, freaking Beck in 7 Shakespeares is like...
They're doing Beck, aren't they? Isn't that the craziest thing? If you turned around... I own 3 volumes of it, it's not a surprise to me. But if you turned around to me earlier this year and said, Kodansha are going to start re-releasing Beck, immediately re-release all the Tokyo Pop volumes, and then they're going to finish the rest of the series, I would have laughed in your face. They're capable of doing... They can do anything. If they can re-release Beck... then they could bloody well do Shaman King.
Yeah, I was more surprised by the fact that, like, his other series, 7 Shakespeare's, they released all the first series of that at once. Like, all 6 volumes, and they're catching up to the Japanese release of a series that, basically no one's heard of in the US. Which is so weird.
Which is a beautiful thing. And I mean, we'll come down to my thoughts as to how this should be done when we get to questions in a bit. But, I think there's ways you can make it work.
Yeah. I think we can move on to questions, because while we could probably go on for Shaman King for another 2 hours, I think we reached a good place for it, and we can use these questions to kind of wrap up on our thoughts on the series. Now, I'd like to have our first question we address be from Reddit. We've got one question from there, from Andy Sislens, who asks, across all the releases, which is your favorite manga cover art?
Ooh. That's a very good question. Again, for those who don't know, if you're interested in Shaman King and you want to learn more about it, Andy's Islands, his websites, Mankin Trad and Patch Cafe, are the most comprehensive fan sites you'll ever find in your life. Highly recommended. But the actual question, oh god, my dog farted. It's horrible. Oh, that's not my answer. Sorry, I got distracted. He sat by my feet and he's clearly eating something bad. It would probably be either volume 16, which is the return to, well, it's the first step into these full colour covers where they're like really bright and lively, with just Yo on it with a lot of negative yellow space. Or it would be volume 10, which is just Horohoro doing a sort of badass pose with his hand upturned, which I think really taps into a lot of the things I love, being both Horohoro and Takei's really good hands.
Those are really good covers. I mean, I really like Volume 32's cover, which just has all the characters together, because I really like covers that have group shots like that. I also like the Volume 4 cover, both in the original release and also the new release that I've seen, is where in the new version it's like Horohoro and his sister, and in the old version.
Oh no, I think in the new version it's still actually just Yo and Anna. It looks a lot like it because there's a small increase in homogeneity. I might be wrong. I am looking it up on eBook Japan right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's still Yo and Anna, because it's just the hair colors are a bit different, because I think in the redraws they do have Yo's hair match, like have like a slight like highlight of the logo's color for the volume.
I see.
Yeah, there's a fantastic colouring style to them. Yeah, it is Yo and Anna still. But I remember both me and Joey Weiser were really obsessed with whether they'd like fully changed it to be a different character, which would have been neat. But still, absolutely fantastic Volume 4, and especially the...
What about you, VLord? What's your favorite?
So I was looking up some of the also Kazenban covers, because I really like those as well. I guess my favorite one of the original Tankobons would be the final volume cover, because I just love all the characters on there, and just like they all are kind of just like all gathered together, and it's kind of cute and nice. But I'd say aside from that, my other favorite would be the volume 18.
Oh, that looks
cover,
nice.
which is the Hana-Gumi drawn in like Takei's more recentish style, which is just like looks beautiful.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Have you seen how the Kanzenban covers actually work as well?
I have not. So like,
this is actually really fascinating. I feel like you don't really get the gist of it when you're just seeing them as a picture. There's an oversoul layer on top of the cover, so you see how like the translucent elements, the actual oversouls themselves, right? You lift that cover off and it's just the characters. It's literally just a translucent cover, then the actual cover underneath it, and it just creates this amazing...
Oh my god, that's so cool.
It's amazing. I feel like it's one of those things that doesn't really get noticed enough because very few people in the West got the Kanzenbans. I mean, why would they? You know, Viz was still releasing stuff back then. But man, they were like the coolest thing. I remember seeing it in action for Volume 1 with like Amidamari being peeled off of Yo's hand, I think, for the Kanzenbans. It blew me away because it's such a natural little design thing.
Let me look at some of these Kanzenban covers. Man, his art style for these covers are really, really good.
Yeah, like, Takei is an artist who really has just evolved rapidly over time.
Oh man, this Volume 6 cover with Tamao and Punkiji Konkuji is actually super cool.
Yeah, right? Like, which seems kind of strange to say for Pyeongkichi and Konkuchi,
they look
right?
actually
like,
kind of badass here.
Yeah. But the Kanzenban covers are great. The only thing I'm not really hot on them is the digital colouring he was using at the time. You see it with Ultimo and Jumbo as well, which were coming out around the same point. And they look a little too muted and unlively, whereas I really am loving all these redrawn covers for the Edge editions that are coming out now. Because he's just using I know, it almost looks like a brush effect. I'm not even sure how to describe it, but the colours are gorgeous
Yeah,
on them
like
now.
I always had issues with like the ultimate covers because a lot of them they look good, but they don't really have the same impact that is Shaman King or his Neko Gahara covers really have.
Like one I really recommend is volume 3. I never much cared for that cover on the original run, especially in the Japanese one where the colours printed out weirdly dark. But the redrawn one of it is so vibrant and interesting and really highlights the religious outfit, the cultural outfitting he's wearing there, and it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really cool covers, past and present.
I mean, even Flowers had some nice covers. They were just character-focused ones, but they felt in the spirit of the original Shaman King covers, but with a white background instead of the original black background, and that was nice.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go wrong with Shaman King. Genuinely, every single run it's had, every sequel it's had, the covers are good. Takei he's probably a better illustrator than he is an actual comic artist. And that's saying a lot because he's a pretty good comic artist.
Again, I think he's an amazing designer.
Mm.
But we also have some more questions from Reddit from Bomber J16, who has a few questions for us here. His first question is, what characters do you find the most interesting in terms of personality and or the culture he represents?
For me, it's Horohoro. I feel like it's probably because they had the most time to slowly do little touches upon Ainu culture there, and I mean, since Shaman King, series like Golden Kamuy have come out, which have done a much better job of exploring that culture in more definite terms. But I feel like it's treated as a nice background element to his character that informs who he is and how he behaves and how he dresses without it being stereotypical at any point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it never feels like it's being like forced upon the reader. It's just kind of there, and it's like he definitely influences who he is, but it's not like he's acting like the most stereotypical like Native American like nature loving person 24/7.
We're talking about Horohoro?
Yeah.
Well, he's an Ainu, a Native American.
Okay,
Don't get them.
I'm brain farting.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Speaking of in terms of cultures that I found really interesting, I mean, I really liked the Patch Tribe. I remember in your original review in Fresh After Victory, Maxy, you found that like some elements about Takei presented them in terms of like, they're selling trinkets on the streets and stuff kind of to support their living. Some of them is relying on stereotypes, but in general, I thought that their culture was deeply fascinating, and Takei did really respect it and do a lot of research in order to depict a fictionalized Native American tribe, really well. And in general, it was really cool to see Native American characters have such a prominent role in a manga, or really any piece of fiction aimed towards children in general. It's quite rare.
Especially like characters like Silva, because Silva has like such a strong presence in that first half of the series.
He's like a mentor figure to Yo.
Yeah, and he really he's a very like relatable character. He's very down to earth, and he's just like treated like your normal person. He's not overly stereotyped, and he's just like a great character in his own right.
Yeah, like I can't fully remember how I originally talked about the patch back on my old episode of Friendship After Victory, but I largely stand by the statement that they're kind of problematic in their presentation, but crucially, it's not a negative presentation. It definitely comes from a place of love and is like, it's using it for at most for a little bit of sort of ribbing humour, which is absolutely fine. Like, it's enough to make you go like a little bit cringy, but even with that in mind, like, there's never a point where you feel like it's a misstep. It's just, when people say science of its time, it's usually a complete and utter bull statement to try and cover up for stuff. I feel like in a lot of ways, Takei's stuff comes from a point in Shaman King where the positive representations of diverse peoples in comic books, especially in Japan, weren't very good. And whilst I wouldn't necessarily describe his way of presenting any culture as progressive, it was still so ridiculously far ahead of how other authors were approaching them at the time that it really is, like, laudable. It's great.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely agree with that. And, yeah, I mean, I think Silva is definitely one of the most interesting characters, and the Patch Tribe in general are really interesting because of their culture and their history. Other characters that I really liked, I really liked, again, that entire group of Team Ren. Ren, Horohoro, and Joco were all really compelling characters. In terms of personality, I think Yo is actually an incredibly unique protagonist because he's, he is really good-natured like a lot of other shonen protagonists are, but he's also really chill and mature in a way that a lot of them aren't. And I think that laid-back nature of his, that fact that he's not so overly excitable or gets so easily flustered and worked up about stuff, makes him a unique presence, especially makes him stand out compared to characters like Luffy or Naruto, especially young Naruto.
Absolutely. Well, he's kind of great as a protagonist because he's laid back to a fault to the point where the focus spreads across to other characters. But that works really well for a series that's as ensemble based as this one is.
Yeah. And then again, like you mentioned before, Anna is an incredibly great character.
Yeah, that can't be said enough. I'll say any amount of characters are my actual favourites. Anna is hands down the best.
Agreed.
And his second question is, what do you think stands out the most in Shaman King compared to other shonen? And I think for me, it goes back to what we've been talking about, that, Takei has this really, strong ideology of pacifism that he carries throughout the entire course of the series, and he never loses focus on that. Everything is in the series, every character, every, story ties into that in some way. And I think that's what makes it so unique, is that he has this consistent focus that, ties everything together, even the most disparate of elements and ideas.
Yeah, having your final battle being based around pacifism is such a... Oh yeah, about the pacifism topic, yeah, so, on the topic of just the Takei's, ideas of pacifism, having your final battle be based around a peaceful conflict is such a ballsy thing, I feel, for a shonen battle manga of all things.
Mm-hmm.
The only other example I can think of it is, Magi. Because Magi's final battle was based around political ideologies and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's such a unique thing to do, and to really stick to that message the entire way through. I guess to make another Shonen Jump comparison, Naruto always had the kind of idea of, people can change and stuff, but even it kind of fell back onto more of, you have to fight to solve conflicts, while Shaman King stuck to its guns, and it didn't change, those ideas.
Yeah.
I feel like Naruto's comparison is particularly apt because it kind of comes to the ideas frequently of, hey, maybe ninja are a thing that either need massive reform or to not exist, and then it turns around and says, yeah, but look at these cool jutsus I can do.
I know, all the evil in the world can be tied back into this one big bad guy who's responsible for all the bad in the world.
It was too convenient for the purposes of having your cake and eating it, whereas I think Shaman King never compromises, for better or worse, on its message.
Yeah, there are definitely things Shaman King could have done better in setting up maybe its ending, maybe developing Hao's more, I guess, subtle sides to his character, even though it already did pretty great, but maybe pushing that more. But even then, the fact that it sticks to those ideas the entire way through is an accomplishment of its own.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Maxy? What do you think stands out the most about Shaman King?
I'm largely in agreement with the both of you, but it's not just a message, it's the way it balances warmth and humour without it being madcap humour, and very serious dark content. I feel like was handled really well. There are some points where it's a little wobbly. Let's say the fight against Faust, I think, might whiplash a bit too often between here's a joke and here's people getting physically maimed. But for the most part, it treads this really fine line between getting a serious message out there and being a fun comic, and it does it brilliantly well, even when it does get convoluted. And that's pretty noteworthy, especially when we're coming into that specific age of Shonen Jump, coming out of the big crash and building itself up into its new shape as a multi-million seller, but not as huge as it was in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm. And Bomber J16's next question is, what is the best and worst part, in your opinion?
That's a hard question. The best part is probably Volume 8 sort of territory, going back to Ren's family home and that entire plotline. I feel like we've not talked about it so far through this, but I feel like it's one incredibly solid story that gives every character a little bit of something to do and develops Ren beyond psychotic little kid.
Yeah.
You know? The worst parts, there's a few you can pick from there, to be honest. I'm going to go for the easy answer there and go and say the original ending because it's one of the worst. The worst in-magazine endings of any comic I've ever read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you, VLord?
I guess for best part, it's probably a tie between the first battle between Marco and Lucius, just because of how wild it is, and then the reveal of like angels being freaking cars and stuff. I think his worst part, I would say the magazine ending, but since Maxy already said that, I'd say maybe the one fight with the Dracula dude.
Oh, the Ryu versus Boris?
Yeah, like there are parts of that fight that I enjoy, but at the same time, I just felt like it wasn't that interesting.
You know what? When you think about it, it's like Ryu's last like focal fight in the series. Like he doesn't really get like a big fight after that. Well, no, Ryu versus Led is a fight, but he doesn't win that. So, but yeah, it's like the last fight he kind of wins in the series.
It's kind of a shame because it's a bit of a whimper fight, I feel.
I mean, it explores his backstory, though.
Yeah.
So, like, how he kind of, got shamanic powers.
Okay, that's right. I do like that part. So, I don't know then, like, this is tough because I don't really usually try to think of the worst part of the series.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw that here as an idea. There's very little interesting in talking about the worst part of the comic. It can be fun to dunk on stuff a little bit, but by and large, if something in a comic isn't very interesting, you don't want to think about it.
It's especially hard with a comic you like too, because like you're in your mind, you're sticking to the moments that you love. Like
it's like for example, I love Bleach. I try not to think about the entirety of Kodansha Manga because that arc did nothing for me.
Oh my god!
Instead, I focus on every single other part of that comic that really kind of, sat well with me. I liked the Fullbring arc a lot, which apparently is a controversial opinion, but I only learnt that recently.
Yeah, I mean, my opinions, I used to be in the camp that really didn't like it, but my opinions on it have changed a bit. I'm more positive on it these days.
Negativity in comics is its own special brand of cynicism because a lot of nerd culture on the internet is built out of entertainers dunking on stuff. I mean, we talked about the weekly manga recap. Like, Why Were a Time, one of the things that I first ever heard of him for back in the day was a video just hating on Prince of Tennis.
Oh
and,
god, that video.
And that absolutely bruited him in. But I don't feel like that's ever as interesting as when I've heard him be into something,
I mean, I think whenever they rag on something like that, it's a lot of fun. Just because they're good. Those guys have a great sense of humor. So, but yeah, I mean, generally, I love people talking about things they really like and digging into what makes them great. I get more out of those, I think, in general. Those kind of discussions.
Yeah. I mean, it's why I never ended up trying to review Unicorn of Hot Springs website.
Oh, those are fighting words for VLord.
No, they aren't fighting words for me. Like, it's not for everyone. Arguably, it's not that great.
That I disliked it. It's that I couldn't find positive enough words for it, and so I went, you know what? Maybe I just won't talk about the comic, because anything I say isn't going to be a recommendation or a denial. It's just going to be well, this wasn't for me, because I don't do the whole dunking
thing. Yeah, like, really? Like, I guess going on a tangent here,
Oh, yeah, no, I've pulled us away, but originally I was just going to, buy for time while you thought about what you were going to say, and then it became a much more stringent point about how much I hate cynicism.
No, but, like, I guess I'll say this, but yeah, Yuna, it's kind of just my guilty pleasure. It has some legitimately good plot points later, but that early stuff is...
It's incredibly well drawn.
It's incredibly well drawn. Tadahiro Miura is very talented, but, like... A lot of the early stuff is just kind of like mindless entertainment.
I mean, it's great for fans of Tolovru.
I don't like Tolovru, but yeah, I guess.
Well then, it's for no one. Nothing's for anyone. What's the worst moment of Shaman King?
Do I really have to pick one?
Wait, you already said what your worst moment was.
Yeah, and even that I don't really hate, though, so...
Yeah, there's no point in Shaman King that I hate, personally. I don't think I really have a worst part, but I guess if I had to choose a least interesting part, I think it's the first volume for me. Because I remember when I first attempted reading the series a few years ago, back when VLord was first starting to read it, I read through the first 2 volumes. I remember, like, that first volume I didn't really get into it, because I just didn't connect with those, like, first couple of stories and what it was trying to set up. And even in my reread, like, going through the series properly all the way through this time around, when I read the first volume, like, I liked it a lot better this time, but I still wasn't, completely, like, hooked by the series at that point. Yeah. In fact, it was more like volume 2 and 3 where I was, like, really getting into the ideas. Volume 3 in particular is where I think the series really, really starts to put its best foot forward with the Tokagero story, because I think and that's where it first really addresses this idea of, like, redemption, forgiveness, that everyone is capable of change, and all these other core themes in the series that Takei will explore deeper down the line. But the character of Tokagero and the resolution of that story was very compelling too, and it elevates Ryu from who was, like, a joke bully character in the first 2 volumes into, like, a compelling character in his own right too. Which, I'm disappointed that Ryu does not maintain that same level of prominence throughout the series. But he was, like, a character that I really, really enjoyed in those first couple volumes, too. So, yeah. But going back to my point, that first volume, again, I still think is, like, the weakest part of Shaman King, just because Takei hasn't, like, really started addressing what the series is about yet in, like, a lot of depth, or with really compelling antagonists to push the story forward and contrast Yo. But my favorite part, I think, is, like, the entire... this is actually really hard, because I really feel like there's just an amazing stretch of Shaman King in the middle, where from the beginning of when they start, like, the tournament all the way until, like, the end of the epilogue. Now, even past that, like, to the end of, like, the first Lucas versus Marco fight is just an incredible stretch of volumes that I was just incredibly engrossed in. If I had to, like, hammer down just, like, a specific one story within that stretch of volumes, it's gotta be the flashback of Yo, Anna, and Masamune.
That was fantastic.
A really great story that, like, really showed you a deeper understanding of their relationship and, like, their histories. You got introduced to Masamune, who's, like, this really compelling character and has this, really personal tie to How that we later get explored too, and that was a really, really great flashback and really great story, especially where it came in from, like, after this big moment where Yo has given up his spot in the Shaman tournament, that, like, it was a great place to have that flashback. And man, but right up there rivaling it, honestly, is, like, the epilogue chapters, specifically everything involving Joco in those epilogue chapters. Like, when his past catches up to him and the 7 Sailor and get revenge on him, and then his spiritual journey inside the Great Spirit, and meeting Pascal Abaj, and then coming back with even stronger than he was before, and then, but, like, re-emphasizing his core philosophy to get Blood 7 Sailor to, like, stand down and stop their goal. And, like, that was a really compelling part of the series to me, too. I really like Joco, and, man, there's just so many moments with that trio of characters, Ren, Joco, and Horohoro, that I could point to and say, oh my god, that was just an amazing moment with these characters. But yeah, I think there's a lot of best parts of Shaman King for me, and then the only, like, least interesting part is that first volume. But the final question from Bomber J16 is, are you familiar with Shaman King Flowers or some of the spin-off stories, and what do you think about them?
I think this is a Maxy-only question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tell you what, let's run this down properly, because there's a lot of stuff that outside of Shaman King Flowers that, if you're talking about side stories, has to be addressed. So, Shaman King Flowers, Superstar, they're the sequels. Easy. I'll go for those first. Flowers is excellent. Like, it's a little convoluted, but it's laser focused. It goes in, it has a very interesting and, again, cynical, shitty kid as its main character, but he works fascinatingly. You get to learn his connection to Hao, who again is God at this point. You get to go and see Illumi, the third Anna, who is just amazing. Worst boots in all of comics. She wears like a dark outfit and then her boots are bright white. It's not a good look, but she's so goddamn cool. Like, that's absolutely amazing. The Death Zero stuff, as much as it's still not actually ended, I think has been a really good examination of war and of conflict that I think deserves to be seen by more people than it can be right now, because the amount of people who can see it is technically zero, no matter what anyone on Twitter would like to let me know after this, because don't. Superstar, off to a good start, focused on the third Anna. Excellent. Shaman King Zero, 6 prequel standalone chapters about the main characters before the start of the series. It's pretty good. It doesn't feel massively necessary, but it definitely helps you understand more about the characters, who are already pretty open books. Mickey's life, just kind of a weird, goofy aside to show how Mikisa and Yo's mum got together, and also just to tell you that Mickey's dead. From Bori Naruto, young Hana hanging out with Ryu for the most part. You get little peeks at where everyone's at. You get to find out that Chocolove's gotten fat and actually spent time in prison, so now he just looks like a different stereotype.
Oh, gosh.
It's fine. Relax is one of the most crucial side bits of Shaman King. It's a one-shot that's literally just Hal going around gathering his followers, and I think it gives you a much better understanding of what could bring together this team of flawed and quite twisted people, but who are ultimately not bad people. And I think that's great. That's amazing. Mappadoji, which is set 1,000 years before the start of the series, it tells you about Hal's original life. It's a little bit messy, kind of interesting. You basically get to learn that a demon who looks like Terriermon from Digimon is partially responsible for Hal being how he is, and that's interesting. I like it. Finally, there's the new spin-off that's focused on Taojun and Horohoro at the moment, which actually feels like the best continuation of Shaman King since its original ending, despite not having anything to do with Yo. It's both Taojun and Horohoro feel like the same characters almost 2 decades on. You know, they're definitely those same people. You see, by hearing more from Horohoro and employees of Tao Ren's, you get to learn more about how Ren's grown as a person, and like considering there's tragedy in his life now with Jean being dead, like how he's still fighting to make the world a better place, which I think's much more in the spirit of Shaman King's ultimate message than either Flowers or the Superstar are at the moment, but time will tell. Is there anything else left? I think that's covered most of them. Oh, no. There's a weird one-shot that ran in Jump Square called Yahabe that didn't seem like it had anything to do with Shaman King. It was just about, like, a boy at school and a strange, mysterious pyramid with arms and legs. Looks a bit like that one guy in a hat from Gravity Falls, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, having an adventure with these cards that basically allow you to twist the rules of the world. Turns out he's actually a very crucial villain to Shaman King, Flowers, and Superstar, to the point that this goofy little pyramid mascot is actually the previous Shaman King.
What the heck?
It's so bizarre, and it does connect it to the one member of the Egyptian team who was like wearing a giant pyramid.
Oh my!
Which it is really neat in a way. Like, I can't believe it connects that. It doesn't connect it as much as you'd think, but it's still like, wow, you know. So that's the majority of all the spin-offs and sequels that connect to it. The best of them is the new one starring Taojun.
Taojun and Horohoro is an interesting pair. I never thought those characters would headline a series together.
Yeah, I honestly, until I read it, I was only aware that it was a series about Taojun. And then I started reading it, and the first half of the chapter, if not more of it, is pretty much just Horohoro, and I was like, this is different to what I expected. But it's really good, and it's the only one of these sequels and spin-offs that isn't actually drawn by Takei, but the artist who's doing it, their style feels very in line with Takei, and if anything, actually more like his older style towards the end of Shaman King than Takei's current post-Ultimo style is now, which is a weird feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer the question? What's the question? I kind of went off on one for a bit.
Oh, the question was just, have you read the spin-offs?
Oh, the answer is yes. Originally I was intent on not actually getting Shonen Magazine Edge because it's big. It's about the same size as Jump Giga, like 600, 700 pages. But it's pricier than a volume of manga, which isn't that pricey. It's like £4 or £5. But in my head, I decided that was too much just for Shaman King. And turns out I'm wrong.
Shame on you,
Maxy.
Maxy.
Perfectly. It's a really good amount of money to pay for more Shaman King, because Shaman King is great.
And that does it for our questions on Reddit. Thank you, Andy Silence and Bomber J16, though Andy has a question he asked us over on Twitter as well. And maybe we can start with that one first. Now that it's switched publishers, how should it get released in English? We've never gotten the true ending or Zero of Flowers, but asking new fans to start at 35 plus 2 plus 6 plus ongoing series is a tall ask.
See, so I was thinking about this earlier, and I avoided saying too much on it because I wanted us to actually get to this question, and I think the best answer is to start with Flowers, and when you're through that, start simul-publishing the Superstar. Because as it goes, like, Flowers is a sequel, and you need to know a couple of things from the complete ending of Shaman King, but it works. It's absolutely fine as it is. And now that Superstar's not leaving it on a crappy cliffhanger, I think it would get people in. You know, people are more likely to go, oh, something I've never read before, or have only read through whatever other means in the world, over going, oh, the thing that I may have bought some of before and now it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I mean, how do you guys feel about it? How would you, if you were to have Shaman King stuff released today for you, where would you want them to begin?
I think they should just begin at the beginning with the original series and release all of that all the way through, and then move on to the sequels and spin-offs, which I guess they could release those simultaneously, since it seems like the linearity of them is not necessarily as important because they all take place during different points in the series. But I think I really want the core series to be all available with the proper ending as well.
Yeah, I feel like if Kodansha does eventually release Shaman King, they're going to do like an all-at-once release like they did for Rave Master. So I feel starting with the original is fine because it'll just all come out at once.
Yeah.
My one hope if they do that, and again, I said it earlier, I would really like a new translation, because it's not as bad as Rave Master. Rave Master, I can only speak to its early volumes. I've not gotten that deep into rereading it. But by just releasing the Tokyo Pop stuff again, it really shows how dry a rush job that translation was out the gate. Like, it doesn't read like people talk, and that was really frustrating with the Rave Master re-release. Shaman King's translation is better than that, but again, if they just did a new one just to smooth over the cracks, create a proper sense of continuity through like ability names and stuff throughout the series, that'd be nice. You were saying about them releasing simultaneously, and you made me think about Chocolove again and how Seven Seas are handling that, where they're releasing Darkness at the same time. And I think that would kind of work, because that's a lot of Shaman King. That's 43 volumes, roughly, depending. Like, it would take a while to get through. And people, even if they did like a monthly release of one volume, people could lose interest. And realistically, they'd probably release it more like how they do Ace of the Diamond, which is a volume every...
I think it's every month.
Is it every month?
I think so now.
God, if that's the case, I'm very far behind on Ace of the Diamond. But like, Ace of the Diamond's a weird one as well, because that's got a sequel series, and it's going to take them a long time to get there, and when they do get there, there might not be a large enough audience to make it worthwhile for them. So I worry about taking too long to retread familiar territory.
But yeah, I think in general, I just want Shaman King to be released in any form in English.
Just Shaman King being back in English at all would be something. Because, I mean, the alternative... No, because even the anime, you can't.
No, it can't.
That. Like, there's English language Shaman King's dead in the water right now, and that feels that feels wrong for something that, it was third string at best behind like Naruto and One Piece, but it was still a cool part of the manga boom in the noughties,
And I think, it's deserving to keep around, to be available for people to read it. So I hope Kodansha does make it available for us again.
On the bright side,
soon.
it has a better chance than Ultimo. Poor Ultimo.
That is perhaps probably true.
Some things are best left
Maybe.
We'll just re-release the middle part of Ultimo and forget about the ending and the beginning weird stuff. Just the happy middle times where everything seems like it's going to be the greatest series ever made.
But to continue on the trend of questions about Shaman King and its sequels, or specifically Shaman King sequels, Homui EXE asks, do you think Takei will ever follow up on Shaman King Flowers?
And the answer there is yes, he is right now, every month.
Yeah.
Shaman King the Superstar was advertised as a sequel to Shaman King. It is 100% just a continuation of Shaman King Flowers, because there isn't a huge amount of time to fill between Shaman King, Funbari no Uta, and Flowers. So it made more sense just to bring Yo back into the fold. Like, he appears at the start of Chapter 2, talking with Hal about the G8 and everything. Like, he's definitely going to be an important character again. But it's Flowers. It's focused on Anna the Third right now. It's going to return to Hana and Death Zero in a future storyline that they've already previewed. Like, it's Flowers. It's Flowers under a different name.
So we're already getting that story continued. We've been getting that story continued for a while.
Yeah, well, only for a couple of months, but still.
Our next question comes from Joey Weiser, award-winning author of Merman and regular on the One Piece podcast and Toho Yaro. He writes, a thing I find interesting about Shaman King is watching Takei seemingly become less and less interested in the tournament structure he'd gotten himself into, cutting away from big fights, setting up an impossible opponent to beat traditionally, etc. Do you think if he'd just stuck to a traditional strength-merited series, it would have been more successful? A traditionally strength-merited series.
Like, if it just continued going the straight battle, if it wasn't in the past.
More
like
linear
the
escalation like Dragon Ball?
Yeah, just something you'd see more in a typical action series, which Shaman King most definitely failed to be. It wasn't interested in that. It absolutely would have been more successful. Would it have been as good? No, not really. I don't think that would have played to the strengths of the series. I think that would have played well to the audience reading the magazine it was in.
Yeah, if Takei had leaned more towards just like straight up tournament battles and keeping that up, I think a lot of readers who are looking for that would have definitely stuck around. But at the same time, I feel like it would taint the ideas and the themes that the series had been setting up.
Yeah, and I think it would have killed the pacing too, because one thing I found really compelling about Shaman King, or at least one thing that was really great quality about it, is that it's a really fast and addicting read because something is always happening, and it just reads really fast, and it's just like moves at a lightning pace. But also, like, if you did just the tournament for most of that series, you feel like you're stuck in one place for a long time, and that becomes less interesting. And this is especially a case when you're reading something weekly. Like, if you're stuck in an arc or like a particular conflict for a long period of time, readers just lose interest in it. They get really tired of it. That's a big complaint that people had about Bleach, is that, that a Rancor conflict lasted for years, and it felt like it was never making any progress.
Yeah.
Or even the Great Ninja War in Naruto. Like, it still did massively successful because it's Naruto, right? But like, you could vocally hear people going on about how they were just getting exhausted of the story.
Yeah, plus like with Shaman King, it's already a competition, so you're having a competition within the competition.
Yeah.
So is there really a point in that, like, keeping that up?
And I feel like a battle tournament was pretty ill-suited to the prospect of finding a new Shaman King, because I don't feel like the way of deciding who would rule a new world would be everyone fighting to the death or near death, I don't know if that was an oversight on Takei's part, or if he, wanted to make a point about it at the time, but, I mean, non-traditional strength is the name of the game for Shaman King. Even even in a more traditional battle, like I was saying about Horohoro versus Block of Maya, right? Like that's a traditional battle, but the whole point of that is about different kinds of strength, whether it's intelligence or willpower.
Yep, definitely. So I think just that regular, this is power levels, this is the tournament structure, and we're just gonna go through this beat for beat, like, and without any, like, mixing it up or playing with expectations. I think that would have just made it a less compelling read.
Absolutely.
Our next question is from G. Hennequin, who asks, should we still call it a Shonen Jump classic if it's moved its IP to Kodansha and isn't a Shueisha property anymore? So yeah, as an addendum, yes, we should. Just wanted to hear you talk about this with your publishers. I definitely think we should still call it a Shonen Jump classic because it ran in Shonen Jump.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, for most of its lifespan so far, it was a Shonen Jump series. And, you know, I think we can still acknowledge it as that, even if future releases will not be related to Shueisha or Shonen Jump in any way.
Yeah, it's like basically with any real series that's kind of left the Shueisha's hands. Like Godsider's still a Shonen Jump classic, and like Cobra's still a Shonen Jump classic, and just like it was published in Shonen Jump. It's a part of Shonen Jump's history, and if Takei is no longer with Shueisha or affiliating with them, he still had a big impact there, and he started his career there. So
yeah.
It's easy with these publisher changes to deny the history of it. I feel like in its own way, by being re-released under the Edge label, it kind of feels like they're wiping it away a little intentionally or otherwise, and you see it as well with Kodansha with their republishing of My Pajama Girlfriend by the author of Hana-Gumi, which wasn't a successful series, but it's still a republishing that sort of reappropriates it as theirs. Or Kongo Bancho, I've started reading this recently from Nakaba Suzuki. It ran in Shonen Sunday, but now it's being republished in Bunkoban for under the Shonen magazine imprint. And it feels like, in a way, it's a denial of where it's been before, but that doesn't change the history of it. And in the case of things like Shaman King, that history is very blatant. You only have to look as far back as the Shonen Jump DS games, Jump Superstars, Jump Ultimate Stars. Yo was there as a prominent character. He's a crucial part of the history of Jump, like Shaman King as a whole.
I mean, just the fact that you can buy all those back issues of Shaman King that have all 285-ish chapters that were serialized within Shonen Jump. Like, the fact those exist out there, you can hunt those down. Like, Shaman King ran in Shonen Jump. It's a part of its history.
Yeah, you can't erase the history no matter what you try. It's always going to be out there. Like, like even our Viz rhymes have Shonen Jump on the labels. Like, it's there. Like, and no matter when Kodansha ever does re-release it here, it's still going to be remembered as a Shonen Jump classic.
Yeah.
By that same measure, look at it this way. Fist of the North Star is a Shonen Jump classic series. Fist of the Blue Sky has nothing to do with Shonen Jump, and as such is not, even though it's connected. By that same measure, Shaman King the Superstar is a Kodansha series, but Shaman King will always still be a Jump series, even though with both cases they've now been published independent of Shueisha. Or Horenshi Gakuen is now published by Nagai himself. It's still one of the most formative Shonen Jump series of all time. Gutsy Frog, it's now published, I think, by the author's own label, doesn't change the fact that it was the big early Shonen Jump series. There's no getting around these bits of history because it's history.
And you can't erase history. You can't ignore it.
Otherwise you repeat it, and it'd be really weird if Shaman King had to leave Shueisha twice.
Our next question is from Terrence D. Darby, Twitch Preacher, or at Joel Dreyer, who asks, is Shaman King the worst offender of a shonen manga to trivialize death? I honestly can't think of another series where characters die so often. It's absurd.
I mean, like, I feel like it's kind of a back and forth, because the series does emphasize the fact that death does matter, and especially early on where they can't reincarnate people, it does have its impact, and it does come back to hit the characters later who do kill others. But I guess later on, like, I guess especially in those later volumes near the end, like, it definitely feels like they become less conscious of trying to not kill the opponent because they could just revive them afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, they stop worrying about whether they'll kill the opponent or not because they, promise that they're going to just revive them afterwards.
Like, they literally kill all the patch cards. They kill all of them.
And, like, even false sacrifice, even though he dies, he still hangs around as a ghost. So.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Here's my incredibly crappy take on this, but, roll with me here for a second. I think, honestly, it trivializes death less than most other shonen series because the deaths happen. Sure, they all get resurrected, but they actually happen. Like, say, one of my big frustrations with One Piece is I never felt any substantial impact from the death of Ace or Whitebeard. For sure, they were shown on page, but it doesn't change the fact that every other time you were led to believe that someone had died in One Piece, they then turned up again later alive. Like, I feel like it had numbed the idea of losing people so that when it actually definitively showed you losing people, you just kind of went, oh, well, that's sad. Alexa, play Despacito. It doesn't work.
Alexa, play the 4-Kid Shaman King opening theme.
And again, it uses death as a way to do power-ups, which it's fine. It repurposes the idea of constant fake-out deaths to be a power-up system, which it's different, it's interesting. It might seem trivializing, but at the least it's a core part of the story being told.
Mm-hmm. I'm in agreement with you. I feel like Shaman King is very respectful of death and what it means. Even though characters are able to come back to life, there is a consequence to that. There is like a meaning to characters dying, and there is significance in them being revived and what that means for them. Like, usually there's like a deeper purpose. It's like when a character gets revived, it's a new beginning for them. When they die for the first time, it's like a consequence of something they did in their past that they had to be punished for, and then they come back to life, and now they have a second chance in order to right their wrongs.
Yeah, like we see that with Chocolove, where each time he died, like, he came back stronger, but also more mature, more hardened, or more kind of aware of what he's done, more ready to face what's gonna come at him in life.
Yeah. So I was very actually happy with the way Shaman King treated that. It does get a little ridiculous, towards the end, where they're like, oh, we'll just bring everyone back to life. We won't worry about whether you die or not.
It's also weird because we don't see the patch people live.
Yeah, it's true. We don't see the patch people get revived at the end, but I assume they do.
Everyone,
and Silva has a daughter.
I'm assuming all the ghosts that we see at the end did get revived.
Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of patch tribe members. I'd be sad if they just died and didn't get revived. Like, Lip and Rap, those little girls, that'd be really sad if they didn't get revived.
I was just like, I'm gonna revive all of you except for, like, you guys right there. I don't like you guys. You guys can just stay dead. Yeah.
Yeah. But, no, I don't think Shaman King is the worst offender to trivialize that. I don't know what is. I mean, I kind of am in line with Maxy in thinking that One Piece's fake-outs do hurt in some ways, it makes the deaths of some of its characters, like, really impactful, but it also makes, like, these false deaths just feel like, yeah, sure.
Especially
sure
since, like, Oda kind of overuses it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, it's hard to trust that these characters are dead, or like buy into these moments where characters are giving a sacrifice which is supposed to cost them their life, when you have this in your back of the mind, okay, Oda's done this so many times already, like, unless we see it on screen, it's not happening.
When we've only
it's happened recently with Pedro. It's like, is Pedro dead?
He's not dead.
I don't believe it.
Like, the fact that we've only seen 3 people legitimately die in One Piece in the present day, when we've had like at least like 50 plus fake outs, it loses a lot of impact.
Mm-hmm. But I think that wraps up our thoughts on that question. So let's get to our final question here from Metal Marion EXE, who asks a few questions here. The first is, did any of you play the video games like the GBA one? I did not play any of the Shaman King video games. All my knowledge of them comes from Chris ranting about how much he hated them, and that's why he had this negative opinion of Shaman King for years.
Yeah, the only Shaman King related game I played is Jump Ultimate Stars.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a Shaman King game.
Yeah, that's a
like,
Jump crossover game.
Yeah. What about you, Maxy?
I mean, I've played them.
And what do you think of them?
They're really weird. One of them is a Pokemon-esque turn-based RPG sort of thing, where you're obtaining multiple spirits. I think there's even a Digimon-style fusion system, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, it doesn't feel like Shaman King at all. It's like a lick of paint over a different game. But at the least, it goes through the anime plot a bunch. It's enjoyable enough. If you like your Pokemons and your Digimons, it's not a bad game. The other ones are weirder. I think they only made one game of it. They did plan a sequel. Was a side-scrolling game in the vein of Castlevania, but very specifically Castlevania 2, the one that nobody likes.
Oh no.
So you're going along on like 2D planes, exploring, battling monsters, but much like Aria of Sorrow, which is an excellent Game Boy Advance Castlevania game, you're collecting the ghosts and they all have different abilities that you can use. And it's pretty fun. Honestly, it's a decent game. I played it. I liked it a lot. It definitely suffered from the same thing as the turn-based RPG in that it wasn't really a Shaman King game. It was just a game made to look like Shaman King. Just fine. You collect Magatama, so, that must make it like it, because Magatama are in the series.
So, on the scale of, like, all those Pokemon clones that were made in the early 2000s, how would it stack up?
It's better than the Medabots Game Boy Advance turn-based RPG game that had a weird lane battling system. It's not as good as Dragon Quest Monsters.
So it's not as good as a good game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, if you like Dragon Quest Monsters.
Are you hating on Dragon Quest Monsters, Maxy?
I think Dragon Quest Monsters is absolutely fine. It's slightly better than the Shaman King.
That doesn't sound very reassuring.
I'm not massively huge on the Pokemon style of turn-based collectible creatures battling systems. Except for Pokemon, because nostalgia's...
Yeah, that's fair. That's the only video games Sid plays, so...
That's true. It is literally the only game.
But, like, it takes a lot to be a really good one. Like, the Digimon World DS ones I always hold up as being real good. Other ones, bit of a struggle. But yeah, so that was all my thought on the video games. I think there might have been a console one, maybe, but that might never have actually come out, so...
Okay. Her second question is, what oversoul would you like to see in a fight versus a JoJo stand? Basically a dream matchup you wanna watch.
They're not massively compatible, so this is hard. Oh, no, absolutely. Here we go. So, Faust's very specific oversoul from his first fight with Yo, where he's animating loads of corpses at once, against, Jay Giles' mother in part 3.
Oh, and Yaba.
Who controls people... Yeah, Yaba, by making the whole...
Yeah, that's a good matchup.
Because they're both going for that exact same vibe, so I feel like that'd be a really weird fight.
Basically zombies versus zombies.
Master of Spirits was the side-scrolling game I was thinking of, so... Thumbs up.
Well, one thumb up or two thumbs up?
One thumb up. The other thumb's kind of down for it not really being a Shaman King game. Wow, there were actually lots of Shaman King games, including on the multiple ones on the PS2.
Some of those might be worth tracking down and seeing how they hold up. Let's see. What oversoul would I want to see fight against a stand? See, if it was just characters, I would want to see Ryu versus Okuyasu, because they're both like these punk characters with pompadours. Or well, Ryu versus Josuke, I guess. More accurately, though. Okuyasu is more for like a dummy, kind of like Ryu is. But like in terms of characters with like compatible or contrasting powers, where it'd be interesting to see how they'd match against.
I guess if I were to go, maybe Lyserg and his original Oversoul against Jolene and Stonefree, because they both kind of have that like I guess little like screen kind of aspect to their powers. So I think that would be interesting to see how they combat against each other.
I'd like the one where the rainbows turn people into snails and Jolene thinks about how sexy that is. I'd like that to go up against anyone, because everyone needs to remember that, like, weather reports
heavy weather.
happened.
That's one of the most iconic parts of that part, I think.
Yeah. Ooh, that stand.
One day that's going to be published legally in English, and the world's going to...
I mean, we'll probably get it
melt.
animated before that at this rate, but...
Oh, almost definitely, seeing as the 2-in-1 volumes for Diamonds Unbreakable, they're not out
early next.
year,
There's like
I think.
there's like
I don't think
there's
they
like
can
a
give them date.
2-month break between the final volume of Part 3 coming out and the first one of Part 4.
Yeah, so it's going to take a while for the manga to catch up on JoJo, because JoJo...
They're never going to catch up, Maxy. We both know this.
Look, at some point, Araki has to die, right?
No, he doesn't. He'll clone himself.
He's not really a
That
vampire.
tap water makes him immortal.
He hydrates well, and we could all do well to learn from that. If you want to take any moral from this episode about Shaman King, let it be known that drink water and you'll look young.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if someone Horohoro could fight a guy with ice powers. I'm thinking like Horohoro versus Pet Shop, or Horohoro versus that guy with ice powers in Part 5.
Gashia or whatever?
Yeah.
Who, makes all those weird, jokes.
We're thinking too much about matching them. Horohoro versus Ado.
Yeah.
Bit of fire and ice action. That would be really interesting. Just a big old steamy fight.
Oh, yeah, let's have a Yo with his giant sword over Soul, like, go up against Polnareff. Let's see if Polnareff's little rapier can fight against a giant sword over Soul. Let's see if that armor stand, his civil chariot can handle that. That'd be funny. But yeah, I can't think of any more right now. But that brings us to our final question from Middle Marion, which I think is a perfect question to bring us full circle on the Shaman King podcast. Can you sing the dub opening? Guys, I want you to join me here.
Do I have
Get
to?
ready. Yeah.
Okay.
This is how we're going to end the show.
Oh no.
Which, actually, we should probably go through where you can find us and all that, and then properly round it up with all of us singing the Shaman King opening to close the show. So, yeah, this has been our Shaman King podcast. That has been, as characteristic of us, very long, but very thorough and informative. And thank you once again, Maxy, for coming on the show and spending over 3 hours to talk about a series with us.
As always, it's a pleasure. All the liquids left my body. That's how warm this is. So this will be my final appearance on this earth.
Poor Maxy. I called dibs on his Bookwalker account.
Oh, you're moving in. You
don't want the
vulture.
book wolf.
Fine, I'll just get
Japan,
both.
trust
It'll
me.
be fine.
I mean, the real treasure loads of Comixology, but I mean, this is a manga podcast, so you don't want all those
Western comics.
And where can the good people find you, Maxy, before you die of heat exhaustion?
At the moment, you can just find me on Twitter at MaxyTheB. I do have a website, friendshipeffortvictory.com. Yeah, that's pretty much all the plugging. Where can we find you two other than on this podcast with me right now?
People can find me on Twitter at VLordGTZ. I'm usually just on there talking about random stuff, or just whatever I'm doing, which is not that much lately because I've been busy because I have a job. So yeah, if you want to talk to me on there about manga or really anything that I'm into, video games, all that stuff, you can go on there. I also have my own podcast on All Comic, Drowning in Manga, where we talk about Shonen Magazine, Shonen Sunday series. But those will come out
Someday.
Yes.
Maybe.
Get it together, VLord. Get it together.
Hey, at least he doesn't have dozens of podcasts on his back like he needs it like I do. But on the subject of where you can find me on Twitter at LumRamayasha, and on Animation Revelation Analyst, wherever I am, you can find me under the name LumRamayasha. But as for the show, you can find Manga Mavericks on Twitter at Manga_Mavericks, on Tumblr at MangaMavericks.tumblr.com, on YouTube on the channel name Manga Mavericks, and on Apple Podcasts and your podcast listening devices and sites and apps of choice under Manga Mavericks. And please, if you would be so inclined, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe and comment and like us on our YouTube channel. That really helps our podcast grow, helps us reach new audiences, and gives us some important feedback that will help us continue to improve the show in the future. You can also send questions, comments, criticisms to us directly at mangamavericks@gmail.com and on Twitter and our other social media platforms in general. And of course, you can find the podcast first on all-comic.com in general. That's our main home base for the podcast. And that about does it for this episode. So now, without further ado, gentlemen, let us sing in peace and harmony.
Help me.
A beloved classic song. Come on, all together now. Are you ready, Maxy? Are you ready, VLord?
No.
Alright, I'm gonna begin.
Ow.
3, 2, 1. Look around you, look beyond. You could make an unbreakable bond. The world around is not what it seems. Souls revealed beyond your wildest dreams. So many things I never could see. So many choices falling on me. Could it be my destiny to be Shaman, Shaman King? To be Shaman, Shaman King. If your spirit is strong, you can be the one. I can look at the world in a different light. I know what it takes to make it right, and I won't give up the fight to be Shaman, Shaman King.
There you go, you got 6 words out of me. That'll do.
For shame. First you didn't do the manga rap battle challenge last year, and now you didn't sing along to the Shaman King over there with me.
Here's my manga rap for you. My name is Max, and I'm here to say I won't sing this song in a funky way, because I'm not good at singing. I don't know words. I ain't got style, I forgot my rhymes, and I ain't got time. I'm gonna go home. I'm in my home now, and I'm gonna leave the podcast. Bye.
Sayonara.
Bye.
Later.
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 Bye.
Later.